Chapter 1806. In fact, Lin Fan was also shocked. He was a Descent Realm swordsman. Not only that, but he was also a genuine great sage. As long as he didn't encounter an ancient god realm expert, he was practically invincible. However, he was instantly killed by Yi Xian. And Yi Xian was only in the Heaven Ascension realm. This was too much. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Lin Fan. "You came to the tomb of the gods to kill me?" Lin Fan looked at Yi Xian. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian smiled. "My name is Yi Xian." As he spoke, a sword sank into Lin Fan's body. The Azure Profound Sword. The Azure Profound Sword madly absorbed Lin Fan's soul. Lin Fan suddenly opened his palm. In his hand, a red talisman directly turned into a faint light and disappeared into the horizon. Taking a look at the sky, Yi Xian said with a smile, "Are you calling for help?" Lin Fan stared at Yi Xian. "You will pay the price." Yi Xian smiled. "Perhaps. But you won't be able to see it." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve. Boom. The Azure Profound Sword completely absorbed Lin Fan. Seeing Yi Xian kill Lin Fan, Yu Luan's face instantly paled. Grand Spiritual God Palace is finished. Completely finished. Yi Xian dared to kill people from the Tomb of the Gods. What more their Grand Spiritual God Palace? As if remembering something, Yu Luan suddenly turned to Cao Xiu and roared, "Do you see what you did? Do you see it?" Cao Xiu's face was ashen. At this moment, she was also afraid. Even an expert of Lin Fan's level was killed by Yi Xian with a single strike. Just how strong was Yi Xian? At this time, Yi Xian turned and walked towards the Grand Spiritual God Palace. At this time, an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was the young martial uncle. Little martial uncle looked at Yi Xian. "Can you spare my Great Spiritual God Palace?" Yi Xian smiled. "When she was targeting Li Xiuran, why didn't you ask her to spare his life?" Little martial uncle said solemnly, "We were wrong." Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't need your apologies." Little Uncle Master suddenly said, "The one at fault is Cao Xiu. How can the rest of the Great Spiritual Palace be innocent?" Yi Xian looked straight at Little Martial Uncle. "You wanted to kill me. What wrong did Li Xiuran do? Why did you target him?" Little Martial Uncle shook his head. "Young Master Yi, we are the ones in the wrong. We have nothing to do with the rest of the people from Great Spiritual God Palace. If we die, can you let them go?" Yi Xian looked straight at his junior uncle. "No." Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared here. It was the outer court elder, Gu Qing. Gu Qing bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Just call me Yi Xian." Gu Qing smiled bitterly. He wanted to plead for mercy but didn't dare to. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before saying, "I'll give you face." With that, he willed in his mind. Qi. The Azure Profound Sword entered Cao Xiu's body and started to absorb her soul. Cao Xiu stared at Yi Xian with eyes full of hatred. "Yi Xian, you will end up worse than me in the future." Yi Xian smiled. "Maybe. But I can see your end, but you won't be able to see mine." Cao Xiu wanted to say something but Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. Boom. Cao Xiu's soul was completely absorbed. Yi Xian turned to look at the palace lord of the Great Spiritual God Palace, Yu Luan. The latter still wanted to say something, but the Qingxian sword had already sunk into his glabella. Bang! Yu Luan was instantly absorbed. After he killed Yu Luan, Yi Xian looked at the junior uncle. That little martial uncle? Little martial uncle was silent. Yi Xian pointed at Gu Qing. "From this moment onward, he's the palace master of Great Spiritual Palace. Do you have a problem with that?" Gu Qing's expression changed drastically when he heard this, and he hurriedly said, How can I be the palace master?" Yi Xian gazed at Gu Qing. "If you become the palace master, then I'll give you face. If it's anyone else, then I won't give it any face." Gu Qing spoke bitterly. I'm not strong enough. No one in Great Spiritual Palace will submit to me." Meanwhile, the junior martial uncle spoke abruptly. "Submit? My entire Great Spiritual Palace will submit to you." Yi Xian glanced at the junior martial uncle, and then he withdrew his thumb that was resting on the hilt of his sword. The junior martial uncle gazed at Gu Qing. "I'll kill anyone who refuses to submit." Gu Qing hesitated for a moment before he nodded. He knew that if he didn't become the palace master, then Great Spiritual Palace would really be destroyed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian spoke abruptly, "Elder Gu Qing, remember to contact me at any time if you have any problems." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Elder Gu Qing turned around to look at the junior martial uncle, and the junior martial uncle spoke softly, "He's actually become so strong. Even though Yi Xian was strong all those years ago, he wasn't so monstrous. But the current Yi Xian wasn't just strong. He was simply a freak. He was too terrifying. Besides ancient god realm experts, no one could stop Yi Xian any longer." Gu Qing had quite a complicated feeling in his heart. He hadn't expected that an outer court disciple he'd casually recruited would actually be so terrifying. After Yi Xian left Great Spiritual Palace, he found a place to reconstruct Li Xiaoran's physical body. With the help of the Azure Profound Sword, it wasn't a difficult task. 3 days later, somewhere by a lake, Li Xiaoran sat cross-legged in front of Yi Xian. At this moment, his aura was even stronger than before, because his soul had been strengthened by the Azure Profound Sword. Around an hour later, Li Xiaoran stood up and looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, thank you." Yi Xian smiled. "Do you still want to return to Great Spiritual Palace?" Li Xiaoran hesitated for a moment and said, "I want to." Yi Xian nodded. "Sure. Now that Elder Gu Qing is the palace master of Great Spiritual Palace, if you return, you'll be able to help him a lot." Li Xiaoran smiled. "Brother Yi, if I may be so bold as to ask, how strong are you now?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Under 3 swords, I'm invincible. Above 3 swords, 1 for 1. As soon as he finished speaking, he instantly regretted it. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta spoke abruptly, "Young master, I won't say anything when you say you're invincible under 3 swords, but your 1 for 1 above 3 swords is too much. Too much." Yi Xian. At the side, Li Xiaoran was suddenly curious. "Brother Yi, who are these 3 swords?" Yi Xian blinked, and then he smiled. "My younger sister, my father, and my big brother." Li Xiaoran. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Brother Li, go back to the Great Spiritual Divine Palace. I'm going to be busy." Li Xiaoran nodded. "Brother Yi, take care." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. After Li Xiaoran left, Yi Xian turned around and left as well. He went directly to the pavilion, and as soon as he arrived, the pavilion master came out to welcome him. The pavilion master cupped his fists. "Young Master Yi." He was already aware of what happened at Great Spiritual Palace. Yi Xian killed Lin Fan from God's graveyard. And it was an instant kill. Needless to say, when he heard this news, he was completely dumbfounded. Lin Fan was a great sage-level swordsman. Yi Xian smiled. "Pavilion Master, I don't come without a reason. This time, I'm here to ask you about something." The Pavilion Master said, "Young Master Yi, please speak." Yi Xian said, "Where is God's graveyard?" Hearing this, Xiao Lu's face was full of shock. "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian smiled and did not say anything. After a moment of silence, Xiao Lu took out a scroll and handed it to Yi Xian. "The entrance to God's graveyard is on this scroll." Yi Xian put away the scroll, then took out a storage ring and handed it to Xiao Lu. "Thank you." The Pavilion Master glanced at the storage ring and hurriedly shook his head. "There's no need for that." Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he said, "Help me pay attention to the movements of the various powers, especially the God's graveyard." He didn't want something like Li Xiaoran to happen again. The Pavilion Master smiled. "That's no problem." Yi Xian put away the storage ring. "Then I owe you a favor." The Pavilion Master was delighted. This was his objective, and that was to make Yi Xian owe him a favor. A favor was much more valuable than an eternal divine crystal. Yi Xian didn't say anything else, and he just cupped his fists. "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. The Pavilion Master looked up into the horizon and said softly, "Is he going to the God's graveyard?" "The God's graveyard?" The Pavilion Master couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly when he thought of this. This was truly too absurd. Yi Xian flew on his sword, and he arrived at the entrance of God's graveyard in less than 2 hours. The God's eye was located in a separate world, and their entrance was in a starry sky. Yi Xian stood before an enormous white hole, and the God's graveyard was just past this hole. However, he didn't go in. He didn't know much about God's graveyard, so he would probably be ganged up on and beaten to death if he went in rashly. Right at this moment, the white hole suddenly trembled, and then an old man walked out from within it in next to no time. A great sage. Yi Xian glanced at the old man, and the old man noticed him as well. The old man frowned when he saw Yi Xian. "Who are you?" Yi Xian blinked. "Are you going to look for that Yi Xian?" The old man gazed at Yi Xian. "How do you know?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I know where Yi Xian is." The old man sized up Yi Xian, and a hint of wariness appeared in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, "You're that Yi Xian." Yi Xian was stunned. The old man stared at Yi Xian. "You killed Lin Fan." Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man turned and ran. The old man was very fast, and he entered the hole in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression darkened. Damn it. The people of God's graveyard weren't so easy to fool. It would be very difficult for him to survive. At this moment, Sword Mausoleum's voice suddenly sounded, "Young master, I've been here before." Yi Xian was stunned, and then asked, "You and your master?" Sword Mausoleum nodded, "Yes. Master has been inside before." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Is she very powerful inside?" Sword Mausoleum immediately said, "Of course. Master is very powerful no matter where she goes. However, Master seemed to have lost one move when he fought with someone in there." Yi Xian turned to look at the hole. Ai had been here before, and she had lost. Damn it. Wasn't it a little boastful to say that he wanted to destroy God's graveyard? At this moment, Sword Mausoleum suddenly said, "Young master, you're not afraid, are you?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he laughed. "Can a small God's graveyard take one of my swords?" Sword Mausoleum said, "Then you go in, young master." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1807. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't move, Sword Mausoleum said again, "Young master, are you really afraid?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I won't kill today. Spare their lives." After saying that, he turned around and left. Sword Mausoleum was speechless. Not long after Yi Xian left, an old man slowly walked out of the white star hole. As soon as the old man came out, the surrounding starry sky trembled slightly as if it had fallen a little. The old man wore a loose black robe and held a walking stick in his hand. He seemed to be carrying a heavy load on his back. He walked very slowly and seemed to have no strength left in him. The old man glanced around and frowned slightly. "Where is he?" At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from beside the old man. "Apotheon Mu, Yi Xian has left." Apotheon Mu nodded slightly. "I'm too late." As he spoke, he glanced at the end of the Star River in the distance. "I never expected that there would be such a genius in the outside world. He's not simple." The voice sounded again. "This person killed 2 people of my God's graveyard in a row. He can't be left alive." At this moment, some strange runes suddenly appeared in the space around Apotheon Mu. As these strange runes appeared, some flames actually appeared on the old man's body. Apotheon Mu frowned slightly. He thought for a moment and said, "I can't stay outside for too long. Find a way to let him enter my God's graveyard. Or lure him here." After saying that, he turned around and left. As soon as he entered the white star hole, the strange red runes around him suddenly disappeared. Restrictions. The supreme laws of nature had restricted many top-notch experts in this universe. After the old man left, the scene quickly returned to calm. After Yi Xian left the entrance of the god's graveyard, he returned to Azure Prefecture. In fact, he wasn't a killer. As long as the god's graveyard didn't come looking for trouble with him, he couldn't be bothered to look for them. Wasn't it nice to cultivate every day and then accompany his lovely wife? In the palace, Yi Xian sat on the dragon throne with Tuoba Yen in his arms. Tuoba Yen said softly, I don't think I'm pregnant. Yi Xian blinked. Then let's continue working hard. Tuoba Yen rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. Idiot. Yi Xian laughed and wrapped his arms around Tuoba Yan's waist. Tuoba Yen looked up at Yi Xian and said seriously, I feel that something is not right. Yi Xian asked, what's not normal? Tuoba Yen said solemnly, logically speaking, I should be pregnant. Hearing this, Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian. How many children does your father have? Yi Xian said solemnly, 2. I think I have an older sister. Nian Xue. Thinking of this, he missed Sister Xue again. Unfortunately, he didn't know where she had gone to have fun. Tuoba Yen continued, then your father. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted Tuoba Yan's words. What do you mean my father? It's our father. Tuoba Yen blinked. A trace of warmth flowed in his heart. Yi Xian held Tuoba Yan's hand and said softly, you mean, the problem lies with me? Tuoba Yen nodded. It's very likely. Because of your bloodline. Bloodline power. Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly understood. His bloodline power was very special. Could it be that his mother could give birth to him because of the immortal bloodline? Thinking of this, Yi Xian's face darkened. Qingqing Yi Clan, Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the heir is removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his lips. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly sounded in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed slightly to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, First Elder, my brother Yi Xian is the heir. Why did you cripple him for no reason? The first elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting for? Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the first elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral shrine. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan for the mining rights. He is fighting for the clan with his life on the line. His fate is unknown. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to strip him of his position. This is really unfair. Impudent. The first elder suddenly raged. Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away from me. At this time, the new heir Yi Lang suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The first elder coldly replied, Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan's guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said with some anger, This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new heir Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of heir, it's everyone's wish. What are you shouting about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry, she just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled, What's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince. Yi Lang nodded, You're not bad. After I become the heir, I need 10 personal guards. From now on, you'll be my personal guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate will go through fire and water for the heir. I'm willing to die 1,000 deaths. Yi Lang nodded slightly. Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show mercy, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe, which was torn and tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his expression turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his expression changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Ling did not stop there, and he rushed towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang in the ancestral hall suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's expression turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's entire face was a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, who was crying for help. He walked up to Yi Ling. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. "Why?" At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall and asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's stripped or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "This subordinate, Zhang Mu, greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and quickly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince, even if it means death. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 1808. After parting ways with Mu Xiaodao and the other girls, Yi Xian returned to Azure Province once more. With the Azure Profound Sword, the entire universe was a little small to him. He could go wherever he wanted. In front of the palace, Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian. "You're leaving again?" Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Tuoba Yen said, "Take care." Yi Xian smiled. "You too." With that said, he hugged Tuoba Yen gently and placed his hands on Tuoba Yen's lower abdomen. "Don't worry too much about the child. I'll come back more often in the future. We just have to work hard." Tuoba Yen rolled his eyes at Yi Xian, his cheeks slightly red. Yi Xian kissed Tuoba Yan's bright red lips and said with a smile, "Wait for me to come back. We'll continue to have children." With that said, he turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Tuoba Yen looked up at the horizon, his gaze gradually becoming infatuated. Even though they were not together every day, their feelings grew stronger. In the starry sky, Yi Xian traveled on his sword. He closed his eyes slightly. During this period of time, he had met many of his good friends and was deeply moved. The world ahead was very exciting, but he must not forget the path he had taken. Many people should not have disappeared from his life just like that, especially those who had helped him in the past. He should not forget a single one of them. His heart. At this moment, Yi Xian finally understood one thing. It was actually very difficult to not forget one's heart. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly asked in puzzlement, Xiao Ta, I've comprehended so much this time, but why haven't I broken through in my sword Dao? Is there a problem somewhere? Xiao Ta said, Young lord, maybe there's something wrong with your brain. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Xiao Ta sighed softly. Young lord, you only have a little bit of life comprehension. Moreover, it has nothing to do with your sword Dao. Did you fart and comprehend something, and your sword Dao will also improve? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta continued, however, there shouldn't be any disadvantages. Because you've realized your own problem. Yi Xian blinked, a little puzzled. What's wrong with me? Xiao Ta asked in return, didn't you realize that you've been a little arrogant lately and want to settle down? Yi Xian frowned. Am I getting carried away? Xiao Ta was silent for a long time before he said, Are you kidding me? Is it fun to tease a tower? Yi Xian said seriously, Xiao Ta, do you think I'm arrogant? Xiao Ta said angrily, Below the 3 swords, you are invincible. Above the 3 swords, 1 for 1, were you the one who said that? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Xiao Ta said, Don't tell me your words are not arrogant. Tell me, among the 3 swords, who can you exchange for? Yi Xian said, Is bragging against the law? Xiao Ta was stunned. Yi Xian said, Since it's not against the law, what's wrong with me bragging a little? Xiao Ta was silent for a long time before he said, You're much more awesome than master. In terms of shamelessness, you've really surpassed your master. Yi Xian laughed. Xiao Ta, I've said before that the most important thing in this world is the skin of one's face. The same skin of one's face, but a different life. Those who laugh on the outside, cry on the inside. Those who laugh on the inside, cry on the outside. The skin of one's face is the most unreliable thing in the world. What's the use of it? Xiao Ta was speechless. Yi Xian smiled. It's just like finding a wife in the secular world. A shameless person will never lack a wife. Xiao Ta sighed softly. Young master, I'm a little worried. Yi Xian didn't understand. Worried about what? Xiao Ta said, Master is already very shameless. As for you, you've surpassed your master. It's not that you're shameless, it's that you don't have any. Now, I'm a little worried about your future children. In the future, this little one will inherit this shameless fine tradition of you too. How scary will that be? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was about to speak when the space in front of Yi Xian trembled slightly. In the next moment, a man walked out. It was the building lord. The building lord said in a low voice, Young Master Yi, the graveyard of gods wants to lure and kill you. Yi Xian frowned. Lure and kill me? The building lord nodded. The ancient gods in the graveyard of gods can't come out. Thus, they want to lure you into the graveyard of gods and kill you. Yi Xian suddenly said, Their ancient gods can't come out? The building lord nodded. They're restricted by the supreme laws. The corners of Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. So, ancient gods can't come out. The building lord continued, Thus, they want to lure you into the graveyard of gods and kill you. Yi Xian said, They definitely want to target the people around me. The building lord nodded. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly said, I only know Li Xiuran and Elder Gu Qing from the great spiritual god palace. With that he disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, Yi Xian was already in the great spiritual god palace. Just as he arrived above the great spiritual god palace, an old man appeared in front of him. The old man looked at Yi Xian and said, I've been waiting for you. Yi Xian smiled. The graveyard of gods. The old man nodded. I want to invite you to the graveyard of gods as a guest. Your 2 friends are there as well. If you go, they'll return. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, What's your status in the graveyard of gods? The old man frowned. What do you mean? Yi Xian moved his mind. Swish. A flying sword pierced through the old man's forehead. It didn't kill him directly, but only locked onto his soul. Not only that, but Yi Xian turned around and waved his sleeve. Swish. Swish. 4 flying swords suddenly flew out. Not far in front of him, the space around him suddenly exploded. Then, 4 men in black appeared in front of Yi Xian. Before these 4 people could react, the 4 flying swords had already sunk into the space between their eyebrows, subduing 5 people in an instant. Yi Xian looked at the old man in front of him and said with a smile, "Now, inform the people in the graveyard of gods to release my friends within an hour. Otherwise, I'll use the lives of 4 of you to exchange for the lives of 2 of them. 2 for 4, I think it's worth it." The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his heart was filled with extreme astonishment. He was at the peak of the great saint realm. Yet now, he actually couldn't even block a single attack from Yi Xian. The strength of this young man before him was truly too terrifying. "I've miscalculated," Yi Xian suddenly said. "Do you have any other questions?" The old man gazed at Yi Xian. "Do you dare to go to the graveyard of gods?" Yi Xian smiled, and then he flicked his sleeve. Bang! The old man's body exploded into pieces, and only his soul remained. However, the flying sword that was stuck in his soul was still there and hadn't vanished. Yi Xian gazed at the old man and said with a smile, "Inform the graveyard of gods to release them. Otherwise, I'll make the 5 of you vanish from this world immediately. You can give it a try and see if I dare." The old man fell silent for a moment, and then he opened his palm. A transmission talisman suddenly shot into the sky from his palm. A short moment later, the space above Yi Xian suddenly trembled, and then an illusory middle-aged man appeared above them. An ancient god realm expert. However, it wasn't his true body, but an illusory image. The old man and the others hurriedly bowed when they saw the middle-aged man. "Greetings, revered you." In the sky, revered you looked down at Yi Xian, but he didn't speak. Yi Xian's figure shook, and then he appeared in front of revered you. He looked at revered you and smiled. "Release them." Revered you said, "You're the first to look down on my graveyard of gods." Yi Xian stared at revered you. "Release them." Revered you said, "Why don't you come to my graveyard of gods?" Yi Xian flicked his sleeve. The head of one of the experts from the graveyard of gods flew into the air. His soul was obliterated. Yi Xian said, "Release them." Revered you stared at Yi Xian, and then he waved his right hand lightly. In an instant, the space to his right split open, and Gu Qing and Li Xiran walked out. Yi Xian waved his right hand, and the flying swords that bound the old man and the others instantly vanished. The old man and the others hurriedly retreated behind revered you, and there was fear in their eyes as they looked at Yi Xian. In the sky, revered you stared at Yi Xian. "The members of my graveyard of gods won't die in vain. You kill a single member of my graveyard of gods, and my graveyard of gods will slaughter your entire family." Yi Xian smiled. "I'll be waiting for you." Revered you gradually became illusory. The old man and the others behind him hurriedly retreated. At this moment, Li Xiran and Gu Qing walked in front of Yi Xian. Gu Qing was about to say something when Yi Xian smiled and said, "I'm the one who implicated you in this matter, not the other way around. I'm the one who should blame myself, not you. I'll take care of it. Just stay in the great spiritual palace." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light and vanished into the horizon. A ray of light suddenly descended from the sky at the entrance of the graveyard of gods, and then a man appeared at the entrance. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the white hole, and then he turned around. Meanwhile, the old man and the others that he released had just arrived. He had the green profound sword, so he was naturally faster than them. The old man and the others' expressions changed drastically when they saw Yi Xian. The old man quickly said, "Yi Xian, what are you trying to do?" Yi Xian smiled. "Kill them." The old man said angrily, "Yi Xian, the graveyard of gods has already fulfilled our promise and let them go. How can you do this?" Yi Xian frowned. "Didn't I let them go?" "I let you go." The old man glared at Yi Xian. "Then why did you stop us?" Yi Xian smiled. "Are we enemies?" The old man said, "Of course." As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. Yi Xian smiled. "Since they are enemies, it's not wrong for me to kill them, right?" As he spoke, he opened his palm and a flying sword appeared in it. He glanced at the white hole in the distance. This place is 100 zhang away from there. Don't say that I, Yixian, am heartless. I'll allow you to run 100 zhang first. The old man stared at Yixian. Yixian, you will die a horrible death. Yixian smiled. Someone once told me the same thing. His name was Tianyi, and now, the grass on his grave is already 10 zhang tall. Tianyi. Chapter 1809. Yixian flicked his sleeve as soon as he finished speaking. In a split second, the profound azure sword flew out and absorbed the old man's soul. After killing the old man and the others, Yixian turned around and looked at the white star hole. Smiling, he said, "God's graveyard." At this time, the space in front of Yixian trembled again. Then, Venerable Yu appeared in front of Yixian. Still not the main body. Venerable Yu looked at Yixian, not saying a word. Yixian smiled. "Want to kill me?" Venerable Yu said, "You think we can't do anything to you?" Yixian spread his hands and said with a smile, "Die." That Venerable Yu stared at Yixian. "No one has ever provoked God's graveyard like this." Yixian smiled. "You seem to have forgotten the cause and effect. If I remember correctly, it was your people who wanted to kill me first, right? What? Only your God's graveyard can kill me, but I can't kill your people." Venerable Yu said, "You want to talk about right and wrong with my God's graveyard?" Yixian smiled. "Do you know how to talk about right and wrong?" Venerable Yu stared at Yixian. "Talk, but it depends on the person. If the one standing before me is a sovereign, of course, my God's graveyard is willing to talk about right and wrong. Pity you're not." Yixian burst out laughing. "It's so real." Venerable Yu said, "Even if you have a sovereign behind you, my God's graveyard will kill you." Yixian smiled. "I'm standing right here. Come, I beg to be killed." Venerable Yu stared at Yixian for a while, then turned and left. As a shadow, he couldn't do anything to Yixian. With Yixian's strength, only an ancient god realm master could suppress him. It could be said that Yixian was the strongest under ancient god realm. The absolute strongest. After watching Venerable Yu leave, Yixian remained silent for a moment, then turned around and left as well. In truth, he also wanted to fight a true ancient god realm master. Because right now, ordinary experts were no longer a match for him. Actually, at this moment, he kind of understood why his big brother kept seeking defeat. Defeat was the only option. Only then would he know what he was lacking. His current problem was that he didn't know how strong he was. He didn't have a clear understanding of his own strength. He didn't even know what he was lacking. Therefore, he wanted to fight a true ancient god realm master. Of course, he would not charge into the graveyard of the gods. Because if he went inside, the other party wouldn't be fighting him alone, but ganging up on him. Although he was confident, he wasn't so confident that he could take on the entire graveyard of gods by himself. The cemetery of the gods. In front of a tomb, Yuzun stood quietly. Behind him were more than 10 tombs. Outside the tombs were endless mountains. It was desolate. Meanwhile, one of the tombs behind Venerable Yu suddenly trembled, and then an old man gradually walked out from within it. It was Apotheon Mu, who had appeared before. Apotheon Mu looked at the sky. The entire sky was gray and very oppressive. Apotheon Yu said softly, "This person is indeed only in the Heaven Ascension realm, but his strength has far exceeded the Heaven Ascension realm. If he touches that level, I'm afraid even an ancient god realm master is no match for him." Apotheon Mu said, "Since he's already an enemy, then get rid of him." Apotheon Yu said, "We can't go out and kill this person. Moreover, this person seems to be acquainted with that supreme law Venerable." After a moment of silence, Apotheon Mu said, "I'll go ask the Venerable." After saying that, he turned and left. After a while, Apotheon Mu arrived in front of a palace. This palace was magnificent and extremely luxurious. In the entire palace, there was only one statue. A statue of a woman. It wasn't a statue of the supreme law of the universe. Apotheon Mu bowed slightly to the statue. "Supreme." After a moment, the the statue suddenly opened its eyes. What's the matter? Apotheon Mu bowed again. We want to kill someone, but the other party may know the supreme law venerable. The woman frowned slightly. It's that woman's people? Apotheon Mu nodded. Yes. A cold light flashed in the woman's eyes. Why give her face? Just kill her. I'll block her side. Hearing this, Apotheon Mu was overjoyed and immediately bowed respectfully. Understood. It's just that the restrictions of the laws outside. Hearing this, the woman frowned again. That law was left by that woman. If I break it by force, it's equivalent to declaring war. There's no need for that now. How about this? I'll give you something. This thing can let you stay outside for a while. As her voice fell, a black wooden tablet suddenly appeared in front of the old man. The old man looked at the wooden tablet, which was painted with a small black word, Imperial. The woman said again, this thing can let you stay outside for an hour. After an hour, the word will disappear. You must come back, otherwise, that woman will not let you go. The old man bowed slightly. Understood. After saying that, he turned and left. Inside the hall, the statue of the woman slowly closed her eyes. After walking out of the hall, Apotheon Mu smiled. Originally, he was still a little nervous. After all, there was a supreme martial artist behind Yi Xian. Therefore, he was worried that the supreme martial artist he believed in would be hindered by the supreme martial artist of the supreme laws and would not let the Tomb of Gods kill Yi Xian. But now it seemed that he was worried too much. Not only did his supreme not stop him, but he was also willing to help. This was simply a pleasant surprise. The smile on Apotheon Mu's mouth gradually widened. Yi Xian, I hope you can still smile when the time comes. After saying that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. In a certain cloud, above this cloud, there was a small island. The small island in the cloud. Daoist sat in front of a wooden table. On the wooden table in front of her, there were several talismans. Daoist was focused on studying them. At this moment, a woman suddenly walked to Daoist's side. Daoist suddenly looked up at the woman, her eyes full of excitement. This is the true law of the universe. The woman smiled and said, It's amazing, right? Daoist nodded. It's extremely profound. The woman chuckled. This is just the foundation. Once you study all of this, you'll realize that great saints and ancient gods are all ants. Daoist said in a low voice, Master, what level has that woman in a plain dress reached? A woman in a plain dress. The smile on the woman's face gradually vanished, and a moment later, she shook her head and sighed, I don't know. Daoist frowned slightly. Even Master doesn't know? The woman nodded. That's the most terrifying thing. Because I've practically reached the peak of the current universe, and I don't even know it. In other words, she has already jumped out of the current universe. Daoist fell silent, and then she asked after a short moment, Are there many experts at Master's level in the current universe? The woman said, Not many. Just a few. Daoist hesitated for a moment and said, The Tomb of Gods also has an expert at Master's level behind it, right? The woman nodded. The Tomb of Gods has a deep relationship with that woman. As she spoke, she gazed at Dao. You're worried about that shameless fellow? Daoist was speechless. The woman shook her head and sighed. Silly girl. Why are you worried about him? To be honest, you should be worried about the Tomb of Gods. Daoist hesitated for a moment and said, I'm afraid that he'll be killed before he can even wait for that woman in a plain dress to return. If he's killed right away, then based on that woman's character. The woman shook her head. Forget about him. In any case, anyone who goes looking for him will suffer misfortune. The kind that suffers misfortune. Daoist was speechless. Within Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, and there were 480 time-dimensional rivers in front of him. Even though he hadn't attained limitless yet, he'd completely grasped the Tao of space-time. The reason he couldn't attain limitless was because of his soul. If he continued to condense it, his soul wouldn't be able to hold on. Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand, and with this wave, the time-dimensional rivers in front of him all disappeared without a trace. He had to think of a way to strengthen his soul. His biggest problem now was his divine soul. How could he strengthen his soul? Break through realms? If he broke through realms, his soul could be strengthened. Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly hesitated. If he broke through, then he'd be at the mortal severing realm. And his goal was to achieve heaven ascension realm limitless. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly said, "Young master, what you're thinking is wrong." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Xiaota, can you tell me how you knew what I was thinking?" Xiaota said, "I guessed." Yi Xian said angrily, "Guess your head. Are you a god? You're still guessing." Xiaota suddenly said, "Young master, why are you talking so much? Do you still want to listen to me?" The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. "Speak." Xiaota said, "The reason why Sister Tianming can achieve Heaven Ascension Realm limitless is because she has already surpassed the Heaven Ascension Realm. Not to mention Heaven Ascension Realm limitless, she can achieve limitless in any realm. But you're different. You haven't even surpassed this realm. How can you achieve limitless in this realm?" Yi Xian thought about it, then said, "What you said seems to make a little bit of sense." Xiaota continued, "You shouldn't be entangled with this realm and limitless. Do what you should do." Yi Xian pondered for a long time, then said, "That makes sense. I didn't think that you, Xiaota, still have some use." "Xiaota!" Yi Xian burst out laughing. He decided not to suppress his level anymore. In fact, he was also a little looking forward to what level he could reach after not suppressing his realm. Space-time? Little saint? He was definitely at the space-time realm at the very least. Just as Yi Xian was about to break through to the next level, his expression suddenly changed. He left Xiaota. As soon as he left Xiaota, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly descended from the sky. Then, a powerful force locked him in place. Yi Xian looked into the distance. There, an old man was slowly walking over. The person who came was none other than Apotheon Mu. Venerable Mu, ancient god realm master. Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu and frowned. "You can come out? Are you surprised?" Apotheon Mu smiled. "Are you surprised?" Yi Xian glanced behind Apotheon Mu. "Are you alone?" Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. "Is it not enough?" "Enough?" Yi Xian shook his head and laughed. "I can fight 100 of you." Apotheon Mu stared at Yi Xian. "Young man, there's a limit to your acting." Yi Xian. P.S. Asking for votes. One would be good too. Chapter 1810. Yi Xian laughed heartily. He spread out his palm, and the sword mausoleum appeared in his hand. In fact, he had long wanted to fight with a real ancient god-level expert. Great saint? Too weak, too weak. Only by fighting with a real ancient god-level expert could he find out his shortcomings. After the sword mausoleum appeared, Yi Xian's figure flashed, and the next moment, a sword light tore through the field. Draw the sword to determine life and death. Moreover, it was the draw the sword to determine life and death with 482 superimposed swords. In the face of a powerhouse of this level, he must go all out and dare not underestimate him. Seeing the power of Yi Xian's sword, Apotheon Mu's brows wrinkled slightly, a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. The power of this sword was far beyond that of a saint. And the guy in front of him was just at the Heaven Ascension realm. So abnormal. Apotheon Mu didn't think too much. He took a step forward and directly punched out. A very ordinary punch. However, it was this ordinary punch that instantly shattered Yi Xian's sword light. At the same time, Yi Xian retreated tens of thousands of feet away. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the space behind him directly burned and then turned into nothingness. The power of one punch was so terrifying. A trace of blood slowly overflowed from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. In this confrontation, he was completely defeated. However, the corner of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curved up. This was the opponent he wanted. Just then, Apotheon Mu suddenly pointed his fingers toward the sky. Boom! In the sky, a huge black vortex suddenly appeared, and the next moment, a huge fingerprint hundreds of feet long fell straight down from the black vortex. Rumble! At this moment, the entire star field began to burn. Fortunately, this star field was a dead and silent star field. Otherwise, this finger would most likely kill hundreds of millions of living beings. In the distance, Yi Xian's mind moved. In an instant, more than a dozen flying swords directly slashed at the giant finger. However, the giant finger was not affected in the slightest and still fell straight down. In the blink of an eye, the giant finger had arrived above Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and pulled out his sword. Draw the sword to decide life and death. Yi Xian slashed at the tip of the giant finger. Boom! A wave of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian fell straight down from the sky. When he fell into a mountain range below, the mountain range instantly turned into nothingness. In a huge abyss, Yi Xian held the sword in his right hand and supported himself on the ground. Blood kept flowing from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with boundless battle intent. At this time, Apotheon Mu silently appeared in front of Yi Xian. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. No wonder they weren't your opponents. You are the first person in history to receive 2 of my moves with the cultivation of heaven ascension. Yi Xian smiled and said, Again. The moment his voice fell, a flying sword suddenly slashed in front of Apotheon Mu. However, Apotheon Mu did not even move, and Yi Xian's flying sword directly shattered. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of Apotheon Mu and slashed down with his sword again. This sword strike was different from the previous ones. This sword strike contained boundless killing intent. Apotheon Mu pointed with his fingers. Boom! Yi Xian's killing power disappeared in an instant. At the same time, Yi Xian retreated again. However, this time, Apotheon Mu also retreated several feet away. Not only that, but there was a sword mark on his fingertip. Apotheon Mu looked at the sword mark on his fingertip and fell silent. Yi Xian heard him. In fact, this was basically impossible. Yi Xian was only in the heaven ascension realm. What a monster! Apotheon Mu glanced at Yi Xian in the distance. You really are a monster. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have killed the people of my god's cemetery. With that, he took a step forward and was about to attack again, but at this time, a flying sword suddenly slashed in front of him. Apotheon Mu gently blocked with his fingers. Boom! The flying sword went straight, then shattered. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. This speed is meaningless to me. Yi Xian grinned, and the next moment he had already rushed in front of Apotheon Mu. Before he could even draw his sword, Apotheon Mu directly punched out. The speed was even faster. Boom! With this punch, Yi Xian flew tens of thousands of feet away together with his sword, and the space within hundreds of thousands of feet behind him turned pitch black in an instant. An ancient god realm expert. His every word and action was enough to shatter the sky and split the earth. Apotheon Mu was about to attack again, but at this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, Wait a minute. Apotheon Mu narrowed his eyes. What? Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. I can't beat you right now. Apotheon Mu smiled, and then? Yi Xian said, Let me improve my strength. Apotheon Mu laughed. Give you 10 years? Yi Xian shook his head. Half a quarter of an hour is enough. As he spoke, boom! An extremely terrifying aura suddenly swept out from his body. And this aura was getting stronger and stronger. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Mu frowned. What are you doing? As Yi Xian's aura grew stronger, the space around him began to boil. Boom! Yi Xian suddenly opened his eyes, and at this moment he directly went from the Heaven Ascension realm to Juchen realm. Juchen realm. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath, his right hand slowly clenched, and the space around him directly cracked bit by bit. In the distance, Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. Juchen. Do you think you can compete with me just because you reached Juchen realm? What a joke. As he spoke, he was about to attack, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from where he stood, and the next moment, a sword light suddenly slashed straight down from the top of his head. 560 overlapped swords to determine life and death. When this sword was unleashed, the heaven and earth directly exploded. This world simply could not withstand the terrifying power of Yi Xian's sword. Apotheon Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of shock, and without thinking much, he blasted out a punch. It was still a very simple punch. Rumble. A wave of sword light shattered, and Yi Xian was once again sent flying. However, this Apotheon Mu also retreated nearly 1,000 feet. After Apotheon Mu stopped, his right hand slowly clenched, his heart incomparably shocked. This guy was actually so terrifying after reaching the Juchen realm? Previously, although Yi Xian's sword was also strong, it did not cause any substantial threat to him. But now Yi Xian's sword actually forced him back 100 feet. The most important thing was that Yi Xian had just reached the Juchen realm. In the distance, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and in his hand, the mausoleum of swords trembled slightly. Power. At this moment, he felt that his body possessed endless power. Juchen realm. Although it was only a realm's difference, Yi Xian discovered that his strength had undergone an earth-shattering change. In the distance, Apotheon Mu suddenly said fiercely, "But Juchen realm, do you think you can overturn the heavens?" As his voice fell, he suddenly took a step forward. Rumble. The space where Yi Xian was exploded right away. In a second, Yi Xian felt thousands of forces were tearing his body apart. He was going to be smashed to pieces. Yi Xian was greatly alarmed, and he hurriedly drew his sword and slashed. Swish. A sword light tore down, and a powerful force suddenly erupted in front of him. And at this time, Apotheon Mu suddenly rushed in front of Yi Xian. He was just about to make a move when several sword lights directly slashed at him. Apotheon Mu's eyes narrowed slightly, and he flicked his sleeves. Boom! Several sword lights shattered, and at this moment, Yi Xian had already retreated 1,000 feet away. Yi Xian pointed at Apotheon Mu, slash. Swish, 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 swish. 4 sword lights slashed straight at Apotheon Mu from 4 directions, fast as thunder. Apotheon Mu was somewhat disdainful. He flicked his sleeves, and a powerful force surged out from his sleeves. His sleeves vibrated, and in the blink of an eye, the 4 rays of sword light were directly shattered. The speed was very fast, but for a powerhouse of his level, pure speed could not hurt him. In the distance, Yi Xian held the mausoleum of swords and sheathed it. Boom! A powerful sword momentum swept out from his body, and then surged towards Apotheon Mu like a wave. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Apotheon Mu glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and then he took a step forward. As soon as his step descended, Yi Xian's sword momentum directly collapsed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. With this charge, he instantly arrived above Apotheon Mu's head, and then he drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. Draw the sword to decide life and death that was overlaid with 580 sword lights. As soon as this sword was drawn, the surrounding annihilated space shattered once more. Apotheon Mu was shocked when he sensed the formidable power contained in Yi Xian's sword. He didn't dare be careless, and he clenched his right hand into a fist before suddenly blasting it forward. Heda. Rumble. The sword light shattered, and Yi Xian's entire body was blasted flying while Apotheon Mu retreated hundreds of feet. As soon as he stopped, his entire right arm split apart. This time, he was really injured. Of course, Yi Xian's injuries were even more serious. At this moment, Yi Xian's entire body had split apart. His body was unable to bear the backlash of that power just now. Fortunately, he had the undying bloodline and violet energy. Otherwise, he might have died. Apotheon Mu raised his head and looked at Yi Xian with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. You must die. This Yi Xian was too monstrous. He couldn't be allowed to grow. Apotheon Mu was about to attack again, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait." Apotheon Mu's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "I still can't beat you right now." Apotheon Mu sneered, "At least you have some self-awareness." Yi Xian said, "Give me some time." A trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of Apotheon Mu's mouth. "I'll give you 10 years. Do you want it?" Yi Xian shook his head. 15 minutes. As he spoke, boom, a powerful aura suddenly rose from his body, and then Yi Xian's aura grew stronger and stronger. In a short while, a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth suddenly filled the world. Space-time realm. Yi Xian directly reached the space-time realm. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Mu was a little dumbfounded. "You!" In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said, "It's enough." Again. After saying that, he disappeared from the spot. A wisp of sword light tore through the field. 650 superimposed sword drawing techniques. In the distance, Apotheon Mu's eyes flashed ferociously. He took a step forward and clasped his hands together. A powerful force suddenly gathered from his body and then converged on his hands. In the next moment, he suddenly rushed forward. Rumble! The sword light suddenly collapsed, and then the two retreated again and again. Yi Xian retreated tens of thousands of feet, and this time, Apotheon Mu also retreated tens of thousands of feet. After Apotheon Mu stopped, more than a dozen sword lights slashed over, and he waved his right hand. Boom! Boom! The sword lights shattered, but he retreated hundreds of feet again. The power of these flying swords was enough to threaten him. Apotheon Mu looked into the distance. At this moment, Yi Xian was in an even worse state. Blood kept gushing out of his mouth. Although he had reached the space-time realm, there was still a gap between him and Apotheon Mu. In the distance, Apotheon Mu grinned. "It's just the space-time realm. Do you think you can overturn the heavens?" After saying that, he was about to attack again, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Wait. Give me 15 minutes. As his voice faded, boom. Another powerful aura swept out from Yi Xian's body. Apotheon Mu was stunned. "You can play like this?" Chapter 1811. At this moment, Apotheon Mu was truly dumbfounded. How could Yi Xian break through so easily? How could it be played like this? How could it be played like this? In the distance, Yi Xian's aura skyrocketed, approaching the minor saint realm. Apotheon Mu stared at Yi Xian. This time, there was fear in his eyes. Apotheon Mu was about to make a move when strange blood-red runes appeared in the space around him. Apotheon Mu was horrified. He quickly took out the wooden token, which had become illusory. "It's about to disappear." Apotheon Mu couldn't care about anything else. He turned around and disappeared. The restriction of the universe's law was no joke. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned when he saw Apotheon Mu suddenly leave. Why did he run? Wasn't he going to continue fighting? After a while, Yi Xian gently pressed his hands down. With this, the powerful aura on his body gradually calmed down. He didn't choose to break through to the minor saint realm, because he had broken through 2 realms in a row. His foundation wasn't stable to begin with. If he tried to break through to the minor saint realm, even if he succeeded, his foundation would be unstable, leaving behind many hidden dangers. Therefore, what he needed to do now was to stabilize his realm. Yi Xian retracted his thoughts and looked at his body. At this moment, there were countless cracks on his body. In the battle with Apotheon Mu just now, he was completely defeated. Of course, this wasn't a bad thing, because he discovered the gap between himself and an ancient god realm expert. He had to admit that the gap between a great saint and an ancient god realm expert was too great. It was like heaven and earth. After a while, Yi Xian directly returned to Xiao Tao's body. 2 hours later, all the injuries on his body had completely healed. After recovering from his injuries, Yi Xian opened his palm, and the sword mausoleum appeared in his hand. After pondering for a moment, Yi Xian came to a dead starry sky. He suddenly drew his sword and slashed. A slash with all his strength. This time, he directly superimposed 720 sword drawing techniques. As the sword fell, the entire starry sky collapsed layer by layer. 720 superimposed sword drawing techniques. This was his current limit. No, that was the limit of not using the power of the bloodline. If he used the power of the bloodline, he could become even stronger. However, be it the bloodline power or the green profound sword, he would not use them if he could. He didn't want to own too many things. After a while, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, countless pieces of information flowed into his mind. This was a sword Dao mark that his father had left in his body. As long as he reached the mortal severing realm, this mark of the way of the sword would open up a level, and now he had broken through 2 levels consecutively. He had to admit that he was very curious about the sword Dao mark that his father and big brother had left behind for him. What could it be? Before long, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. His father had left him a sword technique. This was also a sword technique that his father had modified. This was originally a martial technique, but after his father improved it, it became a sword technique. 1 strike to the head. Yi Xian was ecstatic, because this headlift sword was similar to his flying sword technique. Of course, this headlift sword was stronger. He was happy because he felt that this headlift could be perfectly combined with his flying sword, because the core of both was speed. However, this headlift involved more, especially higher requirements for the way of spacetime. Yi Xian decided to cultivate this headlift first. He did not choose to look at the seal on the spacetime mirror. He did not look at his big brother's seal either. Greedy Green City, Yi Family, Ancestral Shrine. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment on, Yi Xian's position as the heir is removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The speaker was an old man dressed in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi family. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly rang out in the ancestral shrine. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the family wanted to remove Yi Xian, she rushed over despite her illness. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral shrine and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the heir. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a family matter. Why are you interrupting?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." Impudent! The great elder suddenly raged. "It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to strip him of his position or not. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new heir Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 guards of the Yi family rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "It's not fair. My brother has risked his life for the family for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the family. The family is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new heir, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of heir. What are you yelling about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she did not cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard quickly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He quickly bowed deeply. "I'll go through fire and water for the crown prince. I'll do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back. Understood?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man wore a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes. His face was dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt dizzy and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man." "How dare you?" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, "Prince, save me." Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Qingqing, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. "Why?" Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the hall as she asked timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is the prince. Why did you cripple him for no reason?" The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you butting in for?" Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, "Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince." "Impudent!" The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he's crippled or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. "He should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder replied coldly, "Then flog him 30 times. Very quickly, 2 Yi clan guards rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the title of prince. What are you shouting about?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince. Yilang nodded. You're not bad. After I become the prince, I'll need 10 guards. From now on, you'll be my guard. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed deeply. I'll go through fire and water for the prince, and I'll do anything for you. Yilang nodded. Drag him away. This person is causing trouble in the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yilang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yilang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yiling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yilang's mouth curled into a cold smile. In the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his face was dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yiling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yilang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger, and before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yilang did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yilang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yilang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, your man. As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, tears welled up in her eyes. Brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Chapter 1812. External Object. Yi Xian's external object is naturally the green profound sword. However, he doesn't really want to use the green profound sword. The current him really doesn't want to use his bloodline power and the green profound sword too much. However, if this Apotheon Mu uses an external object, he will definitely use it. Facing a powerhouse of this level, he doesn't dare to have the slightest contempt. If the other party uses an external object to directly kill him, that would be a pain in the ass. Yi Xian spread out his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. When he saw the green profound sword, Apotheon Mu said in a deep voice, the power of the universe's law origin. You really are that supremacy's person. Yi Xian said with a smile, actually, I don't really want to use external objects. How about we have a fair fight? Apotheon Mu said with a smile, I know, you want to use me to practice. However, I want you dead. As he spoke, he spread out his palm, and the piece of God paper slowly floated up. Looking at the paper, Yi Xian frowned. What is this thing? Apotheon Mu said with a smile, God paper. Yi Xian shook his head. I've never heard of it. Apotheon Mu laughed. Yi Xian, this is a real ancient divine object. As he spoke, he suddenly bit his finger and then wrote 2 blood-red words on the God paper. Yi Xian. Yi Xian. As soon as he finished writing, Apotheon Mu's entire body trembled violently. A powerful force suddenly gushed out of his body and then converged on the God paper. Boom! The God paper directly burned. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned, secretly vigilant in his heart. This thing is a bit mysterious. At this moment, the space around him directly burned. Nameless fire. Yi Xian was startled in his heart. He quickly urged his profound qi, and a powerful sword momentum swept out of his body. Boom! As soon as the sword momentum appeared, the surrounding space directly boiled up. However, the nameless fire still existed, not affected at all. In the distance, Apotheon Mu suddenly laughed and said, "Yi Xian, this is Yang Fire, a Yang Fire that specializes in burning lifespan. In this world, other than venerables, not even ancient God realm masters can escape from this fire." As he spoke, he glanced at the divine paper. "Once this paper burns out, you'll be finished as well." Yi Xian's face darkened. He discovered that his lifespan was indeed disappearing at an extremely fast speed. But he didn't understand why. Directly targeting lifespan? Not only that, but he also discovered that his soul leaf was disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian couldn't help but look at the divine paper. Damn, this thing is a bit strange. At this time, Apotheon Mu suddenly smiled and said, "Are you in despair?" This fire was the Yang Fire of the human world. Nothing could invade it. Even the power of laws could not harm it in the slightest. In this world, it belongs to... At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly swung his sword lightly. Boom! With a wave of his hand, the Yang Fire disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu. "What does it belong to?" Apotheon Mu's face was full of astonishment. Yi Xian smiled and said, "This fire doesn't seem to be anything special. Could it be a fake fire?" Apotheon Mu stared at the azure sword in Yi Xian's hand. "There's a problem with your sword." Yi Xian blinked. "What problem?" Apotheon Mu's face was extremely unsightly. "Your sword," Yi Xian immediately said, "this sword is called Azure Profound. It can cut all causes and effects in the world. As long as it's within the rules, there's nothing this sword can't cut." He paused for a moment and said, "I made this sword myself." "Bullshit." Apotheon Mu said angrily, "You made it yourself? Where's your face?" Yi Xian raised the Azure Profound sword in his hand and said with a smile, "I'm not going to talk about this with you. Come, take this sword of mine." As he spoke, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. A wisp of sword light flashed across the field. In the distance, Apotheon Mu's face instantly changed. He crisscrossed his arms and pushed them forward. In an instant, the space he was in directly turned into an impenetrable wall. Facing Yi Xian's sword, his instinctive sense of crisis made him choose to defend instead of facing it head-on. At this moment, the space he was in had condensed thousands of space-time. The strongest defensive stance. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword arrived. The sword in Yi Xian's hand directly passed through countless space-time and slashed Apotheon Mu's arms. Boom! Apotheon Mu's body instantly disappeared, and his soul directly retreated nearly 100,000 feet away. Apotheon Mu was stunned. Yi Xian was also stunned. Apotheon Mu was stunned because Yi Xian's sword directly ignored his space-time. His space-time defenses didn't seem to exist in front of Yi Xian's sword. This was simply impossible. As for Yi Xian, he was stunned because he discovered that the Azure Profound sword could ignore space-time. The core of the Azure Profound sword itself was time and space, and it even surpassed the time and space of the current universe. Therefore, it could directly ignore the time and space of the current universe. Yi Xian looked at the Azure Profound sword in his hand. At this moment, he recalled Qing Er's words. The sword still had many functions, and he had to slowly experience them himself. At this moment, Apotheon Mu suddenly said, "Is this the sword that supremacy gave you?" Yi Xian looked at Apotheon Mu and laughed. "What do you think?" Apotheon Mu was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Apotheon Mu's face changed drastically. He wanted to flee, but Yi Xian's sword was faster. The Azure Profound sword directly pierced between Apotheon Mu's brows. Apotheon Mu's soul stiffened. He was gone. He hadn't expected that not only would he fail to kill Yi Xian after bringing the divine paper out, but he would be killed by Yi Xian instead. Yi Xian was scary. However, the sword in Yi Xian's hand was even scarier. He wanted to inform the Tomb of the Gods, but the Azure Profound sword locked his soul, and he couldn't move at all. At this moment, the Azure Profound sword was frantically devouring his soul. Apotheon Mu looked at Yi Xian. We all underestimated you. Yi Xian smiled. I originally had no enmity with the Tomb of the Gods, but now there is. I won't talk to you because I know it's meaningless. So either you die or I die. Apotheon Mu slowly closed his eyes. As Yi Xian said, the Tomb of the Gods and Yi Xian had no enmity, but now, both sides were irreconcilable enemies. Apotheon Mu still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "Have a safe journey." After saying that, he spread out his palm. Boom! The azure profound sword directly absorbed Apotheon Mu's soul. After absorbing Apotheon Mu's soul, the azure profound sword trembled violently. This is the soul of an ancient god realm expert. It's not an ordinary nourishment. Soul said excitedly, "Young lord, this soul is not an ordinary nourishment. It would be great if a few more came." A few more? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Little guy, do you think souls are cabbages? This is the soul of an ancient god realm expert. Soul giggled. If 2 more come, I can definitely break through. Yi Xian smiled and said, there will be a chance. Although there are few ancient god realm experts outside, there are definitely many inside the Tomb of the Gods. 2 ancient god realm experts' souls are not a big deal. Yi Xian laughed, put away the azure profound sword, turned around and disappeared. Tomb of the Gods. In front of a certain tomb, Apotheon Yu suddenly turned around. Not far away, a tomb suddenly disappeared. Seeing this scene, Apotheon Yu's expression changed. How is this possible? People die, the tomb is destroyed. And this tomb is Apotheon Mu's tomb. Apotheon Mu is dead. Apotheon Yu's face was extremely unsightly. Was it Yi Xian who killed him? But his first thought was that it was impossible. How could Yi Xian kill Apotheon Mu? Apotheon Mu was a veteran ancient god realm expert. But what about Yi Xian? He's just a space-time realm expert. But if it wasn't Yi Xian, then who killed him? Apotheon Yu fell silent. It doesn't matter who killed him. It's troublesome. Suddenly, a voice resounded from the side. Is he dead? Apotheon Yu turned around, and a middle-aged man walked over slowly. Apotheon Yu was slightly stunned when he saw the middle-aged man, and then he hurriedly said, Left Apotheon, why are you up? The left Apotheon shook his head. I feel slightly uneasy, that's why. As he spoke, he gazed at Apotheon Mu's tomb. Tell me about it. Apotheon Yu nodded, and then he told the left about the enmity between Yi Xian and the Tomb of the Gods. After a short while, Apotheon Yu shook his head. It's not worth offending such a genius for such a trivial matter. Apotheon Yu fell silent. Actually, he felt that it wasn't worth it as well. But who would have imagined that Yi Xian was such a monstrous genius? Unfortunately, there were no ifs. Suddenly, the left Apotheon said, even the Supremes agree to kill him? Apotheon Yu nodded. There seems to be some enmity between the Supremes and the Supremes. The left Apotheon smiled. Then let's kill him. Apotheon Yu gazed at the left Apotheon, and the left Apotheon said, people like Yi Xian should either be friends or enemies, and they must be eliminated at all costs. A monstrous genius like him will be too terrifying once he grows up. Most importantly, the Supremes support us in killing him. Apotheon Yu nodded. That's what Apotheon Mu and I think as well. But now, Apotheon Mu has fallen, and we don't know if it was Yi Xian who killed him or if someone else helped him kill him. The left Apotheon suddenly said, why don't we lead him here? Apotheon Yu smiled bitterly. Both Apotheon Mu and I thought so as well. But he's very cunning, and he won't enter this world easily. The left Apotheon asked, does he have any friends or family? Apotheon Yu said, yes. But our people can't touch his family, because those of us who can get out aren't his match. And the few of us who aren't afraid of him can't get out because of the restriction of the laws. Saying this, he felt a little sullen. If they could get out, it wouldn't be difficult to kill Yi Xian. The problem was, they who could suppress Yi Xian couldn't get out. After a moment of silence, the left Apotheon said, then bring him here by force. Inside Xiaota, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, he was combining his flying sword technique with the head-lifting technique. Flying sword art. After a few years, Yi Xian had perfectly combined the two. As for how powerful it was, he didn't know, and he wasn't sure if it could kill an ancient god realm expert. After all, an ancient god realm expert wasn't simple. After combining the flying sword art and head lift art, he unlocked the second seal of his father's sword imprint. As soon as the second seal was unlocked, 4 words entered Yi Xian's mind: Invincible Sword Domain. Chapter 1813. Invincible Sword Domain. Yi Xian was stunned. Something about the sword domain? Soon, more and more information entered Yi Xian's mind. Gradually, Yi Xian's expression became serious. Invincible Sword Domain. This was also a sword technique. However, this was only the upper part, and the core of this upper part was defense. Using the sword as a domain to guard a realm. Defense. Yi Xian began to study this invincible sword domain that his father had left behind. It definitely wouldn't be bad. Moreover, he just happened to lack a defensive sword technique. This invincible sword domain was perfect. The core of cultivating this invincible sword domain was to comprehend the sword domain, and Yi Xian just happened to have comprehended it. However, his sword domain was of little value and hadn't been very useful. However, after studying the invincible sword domain that his father had left behind, he found that he was wrong. This sword domain wasn't just a normal kind of terrifying. Moreover, he didn't have a thorough understanding of the sword domain. Sword domain. Using the sword to form a domain, and this domain could be independent of time and space. A domain was equivalent to being independent of the current universe. Of course, it was very difficult to achieve this. However, he had all the time to study and cultivate. 10 years inside Xiao was equivalent to 1 day outside. This was too abnormal. It was so abnormal that even he felt it was a bit excessive. This was a bit like cheating. However, he liked the feeling of cheating. How depraved. Yi Xian laughed. Continue cultivating. Somewhere in the clouds, a woman sat cross-legged in the sea of clouds. Her eyes were slightly closed, and she seemed to be one with heaven and earth. This woman was the supreme law of the universe. At this moment, the clouds in front of her suddenly parted, and in the next moment, a woman slowly walked over. This woman was the supreme behind God's graveyard. The universal law opened its eyes and looked at the woman. See, your people have left God's graveyard. See smiled. Really? Why didn't I know? The universal law stared at C. Your people are targeting that youth. Nie walked in front of the universal laws and said with a smile, isn't it normal for juniors to quarrel? After a moment of silence, the universal law said, are you going to touch my people? Mi Yi's eyes narrowed. It's really your man. The law of the universe said, he's my man. Chu Yi, if you have something against me, don't target him. He's just a child. Child? He suddenly laughed. Fan Duo, you are so funny. When your man killed my man, why didn't you say he was a child? Fan Duo stared at it. Don't touch him. The corner of Mi Yi's mouth curled up. I'm going to move. Fan Duo suddenly stood up. She stared straight at him. I told you. The grudges between us are our business. If you have anything, you can come at me. Don't touch him. If anything happens to him, I'll fight you to the death. She smiled and said, looks like you really care about him. The more you care, the happier I am. With that, she turned around and left. Fan Duo glanced at Nie who had disappeared into the distance and said indifferently, don't hold back, target him to death. Inside the Xiao, Yi Xian was still cultivating. Several years had passed. He had to admit that every time he cultivated, time passed by abnormally fast. Cultivation knew no time. In these years, he had not only thoroughly stabilized his realm, but he had also stacked drawing sword to determine life and death to 820. This was the limit of what he could do now. 820. In fact, his goal was 1000. However, he couldn't do it. Moreover, even 820 was a bit difficult for the Mausoleum of Swords to bear. Therefore, he had to find a way to improve the mausoleum of swords. Apart from that, he had also cultivated drawing sword to determine life and death to his limit. However, he still wasn't confident that he could kill an ancient god expert in an instant. When he fought against Apotheon Mu before, if he didn't use the Azure Profound Sword, he was always at a disadvantage. Of course, if he used the Azure Profound Sword now, he was 90% sure that he could kill an ancient god expert in an instant. The Azure Profound Sword's improvement was too terrifying. However, he still didn't want to use the Azure Profound Sword. After all, the Azure Profound Sword's power wasn't his own. External objects. In the past, he had relied too much on external objects, so his strength and mental state had improved slowly. Now, he wanted to rely more on himself. Of course, if others used external objects, or if the enemy was too strong, he wouldn't hold back. Besides drawing sword to determine life and death and lifting sword, he had also successfully cultivated the invincible sword domain. Domain defense. One sword, one domain, one world. The strongest defensive sword technique. As long as he activated the invincible sword domain, he was practically invincible within it. Unfortunately, he only had the upper half of it. The upper half was defense, so the lower half was definitely offense. He was very curious about this part of the attack, because the best defense was offense. After a while, Yixian decided to remove the sword mark his big brother left behind. However, at this moment, he seemed to sense something, and his brows suddenly furrowed. In the next moment, he vanished on the spot. Yixian had just left Xiaota when a shadow appeared before him. Apotheon. Yixian was slightly puzzled. "I'm very curious, how did you find me?" "Venerable Yu said plainly, was it difficult to find you?" Yixian smiled. "Forget it. Let's not talk about this. This time, you're just a shadow. It seems like you're not here to kill me. Why, are you trying to reconcile?" "Reconcile?" Venerable Yu smiled. "What are you dreaming about in the day?" Yixian laughed and waved his hand casually. Venerable Yu's shadow was erased. Yixian was about to turn and leave when the space above his head suddenly trembled. Then, the space split open and a huge black mirror floated out. And the black mirror was facing him. Yixian frowned. In the next moment, the space around him became illusory. In the blink of an eye, he appeared before a graveyard. God's graveyard? Yixian's face darkened. He was forcefully sent to God's graveyard. And the black mirror was still above his head. At this moment, Venerable Yu appeared before Yixian. In front of Venerable Yu stood a middle-aged man. It was the Left Reverend. Two ancient god realm experts. The Left Reverend sized up Yixian and frowned. Space-time mirror. He didn't think that Yixian was really just a space-time mirror. Yixian looked around. It was dark and oppressive. Behind the Left Reverend and Venerable Yu was a graveyard. Yixian looked curiously at the graveyard and asked, "Are there treasures here?" Venerable Yu laughed. "You're very calm." Yixian looked at Venerable Yu. "You want to fight me 2-on-1? Venerable Yu shook his head. "No." Yixian nodded. "Good." Venerable Yu added, "We want to fight you 5-on-1. Three old men suddenly appeared behind Yixian. All of them were ancient god realm experts. Yixian was enraged. 5-on-1, where's your face? Where's your face?" Venerable Yu laughed. "We're shameless, what are you going to do about it?" Yixian laughed heartily, and with a thought, he disappeared from the spot. He disappeared without a trace. Venerable Yu and the others were dumbfounded. He disappeared right under their noses? At this time, Yixian was outside the Tomb of Gods. In his hand was the profound azure sword. The profound azure sword could ignore space-time, and not only could it be used to kill, it could also be used to escape. As long as he wanted to escape, not many in this world could catch up to him. Yixian looked at the entrance of the Tomb of Gods in the distance. The corners of his lips curled up. He already knew the world inside the Tomb of Gods. As long as he wanted to, he could enter any place in the Tomb of Gods at any time. Of course, he was afraid of being ganged up on. If he was entangled by 5 ancient god realm experts, he would have a headache. However, to him, even if he couldn't win, he could still run. As long as he didn't fight to the death, forget 5 ancient god realm experts, even 10 wouldn't be able to kill him. Within the tomb of gods, Venerable Yu and the others were stunned. He ran. This guy ran away just like that. And he ran right under their noses. Even now, they didn't know how Yi Xian escaped. The left hall master spoke abruptly. We were careless. Venerable Yu spoke solemnly. How did he escape? There's a barrier between the tomb of gods and the outside world, but he didn't pass through it. He just vanished into thin air. The left hall master spoke softly. Space-time Dao. He used space-time to escape. It'll be even more difficult for us to catch him. As he spoke, his expression darkened. He hadn't expected Yi Xian to be proficient in space-time Dao. Venerable Yu asked, what should we do now? The left hall master spoke indifferently. There's only one way to make him stay here, and that's to make his loved one stay here. As long as he has someone he cares about here, he won't escape. Venerable Yu fell silent for a moment. According to what I know, while the heaven abode was looking for him, there's another person on the wanted list. The left hall master asked, who? Venerable Yu thought deeply for a while. It seems to be a woman in a plain dress. It said that she's Yi Xian's younger sister, and they're quite close. If we can find this woman and bring her here, then we can use her as a hostage. That Yi Xian will definitely give in to us. The left hall master fell silent for a while. Did you find her in the heaven abode? Venerable Yu shook his head. No. What they told me was that this woman hid herself out of fear. Then he looked at the left hall master. This is the only solution we have at the moment. That is to find this woman and bring her here. Otherwise, Yi Xian won't give in. If he doesn't want to stay here, then we can't do anything to him. The left hall master said, then we'll find her. Find her at all costs and bring her to the tomb of gods. Venerable Yu spoke solemnly. We might have to use some ancient divine items. The left hall master closed his eyes slowly. Use them at will. We must find her. Venerable Yu nodded. Understood. P.S. 1 vote is also love. Asking for votes. Although the update isn't ideal, I still want to ask for votes. Thank you. Chapter 1814. It didn't take long for the entire god's graveyard to start searching for that woman. Moreover, the god's graveyard's power wasn't something a small abode could compare to. For a time, countless scouts had headed throughout the universe to search for that woman. In the building, the building master's expression was extremely gloomy. The woman by his side spoke in a low voice. Why did the god's graveyard look for you? The building master sighed softly. They want us to help them find that woman. The woman frowned slightly. They want to make a move on the people around Yi Xian? The building master nodded. Yes. The woman said, help. The building master fell silent for a moment, and then he said, I'll contact Brother Yi and see what he has to say. As he spoke, he left and went downstairs. In a certain part of the starry sky, the building master had just appeared when Yi Xian appeared before him. The building master hurriedly said, Young Master Yi. Yi Xian smiled. Did something happen in the god's graveyard for you to come look for me personally? The building master nodded. They're looking for your younger sister. Yi Xian frowned slightly. My younger sister? Which younger sister? The building master's expression was slightly strange. Does this fellow have many younger sisters? Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, Building master, you still haven't answered me. The building master hurriedly said, They're looking for that woman in a plain dress. Yi Xian blinked. He found it hard to believe. Why are they looking for her? The building master spoke in a low voice. They probably want to use her to threaten you. Yi Xian fell silent for a long time, and then he said, Brilliant. What a brilliant move. I admire them. I, Yi Xian, admire them from the bottom of my heart. The building master hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Young Master Yi, their plan is truly vicious. If they were to find your sister, you and your sister's situation. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. The building lord glanced at Yi Xian. I wonder what plans young Master Yi has? Yi Xian said, I originally had a lot of ideas, but I didn't expect them to do something like this. I don't have any ideas now. Tower Lord Xiaolu, Yi Xian glanced at the small building's owner. They asked you to help them search? The building master nodded. That's right. Of course, I won't really help them find it. Yi Xian smiled and said, help them find it. The building master was stunned. Why? Yi Xian said seriously, if you don't help them find it, they might target you. The Tower Lord said in a deep voice, but if I find it Yi Xian smiled and said, I won't blame you. On the contrary, they will thank you. The owner of the small building frowned. Why is that? Yi Xian blinked and then he said, do as I say. I will bear all the consequences. The building master glanced at Yi Xian, and after a moment of silence, he said, okay. Yi Xian smiled and said, if there's any news about God's graveyard, remember to inform me. I, Yi Xian, will always remember this favor. The building master cupped his fists. Brother Yi, don't worry. If there's any movement, I will inform Brother Yi immediately. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Okay. The building master said, Brother Yi, take care. With that, he turned and left. After the building master left, Yi Xian suddenly said softly, this God's graveyard is really something. Why did they suddenly take it so hard? He really didn't expect God's graveyard to look for Qing to. What kind of divine operation was this? He was stupefied. At this moment, Xiaota suddenly said, young master, look at Xiaoan. Xiaoan. Yi Xian was shocked, and he hurriedly entered Xiaota. Within Xiaota, Xiaoan was lying on the ground, and flames were emanating from her body. Yi Xian was just about to approach when Xiaota suddenly said, young master, don't come near. This fire will burn you to death. Yi Xian glanced at the flames, and then he said in a low voice, what's going on with Xiaoan? Xiaota said, I don't know. She was playing around just now, and she suddenly burst into flames. At this moment, Xiaoan suddenly said with a trembling voice, Big brother Yi Xian? Yi Xian hurriedly said, Xiaoan, are you okay? Xiaoan's entire body curled up, and he said with a trembling voice, it hurts. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword appeared in his hand. He directly slashed forward. The flames on Xiaoan's body were directly split into two, and then they escaped from Xiaoan's body. After the two flames escaped from Xiaoan's body, they merged into one, and then turned into a human face. A human face. Yi Xian stared at the human face. What are you? The human face also stared at Yi Xian. Ignorant mortal, you should stay away from the holy venerate. The holy venerate? Yi Xian looked at Xiaoan in front of him. She is the holy venerate? As he spoke, he walked in front of Xiaoan and was about to carry her up, but at this moment, the human face suddenly said angrily, you mortal, you have no right to touch the holy venerate. Yi Xian suddenly raised his hand, and he suddenly raised his sword. Boom! The human face was directly split into two by the green profound sword, but very quickly, it merged back into one, but it became a lot more illusory. After the two merged back into one, it looked at the sword in Yi Xian's hand, and its eyes were filled with fear. You mortal, this sword. Yi Xian glanced at the human face and then said, who the hell are you? The human face stared at Yi Xian, and then said, I am the Fire Lord under the first god in the world. Yi Xian slightly frowned. God? The human face looked arrogant. You mortal, why are you still not kneeling? Yi Xian held the green profound sword in his hand, and raised it. Believe it or not, I will cut you in half. The human face glanced at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand, and it was obvious that it was very afraid. It hesitated and then said, Mortal, do you dare not to use this sword? Yi Xian laughed. This fire of yours is really shameless. I am a swordsman. If not a sword, what else can I use? The human face stared at Yi Xian. Mortal, you. Yi Xian suddenly said, what do you mean by ordinary? I really don't like the way you act all high and mighty. If you dare to call me that again, I will immediately cut you up. The human face said angrily, I am the Fire Lord, I have a godhead. Xian laughed and said, "What god?" Qing said that there is no such thing as a god in this world, only some relatively strong people, and when they become strong enough, they will call themselves gods. Bullsh asterisk T. The human face was furious. What she said is bullsh asterisk T. She knows nothing about power. Only an ignorant person would say such ignorant things. Yi Xian frowned, and at this time, Xiao suddenly could not help but say, "I don't like what you said." The human face stared at Xiao Ta and then said, "You mortal Ta, shut up, you have no right to speak to me." Yi Xian. Hearing this, Xiao Ta instantly jumped up. F asterisk CK your ancestors. I gave you face, but you don't want it. As he spoke, he directly rammed towards the human face. Rumble. In next to no time, the tower and the flames started fighting. Yi Xian was shocked. He realized that after Qing's transformation, Xiao Ta was quite fierce. He could actually resist the human face's flame. Even he was slightly afraid of that flame. At this time, Xiaoan, who was in Yi Xian's arms, suddenly said weakly, "Brother." Yi Xian quickly looked down at Xiaoan, and then he held Xiaoan's hand with his right hand, and countless strands of violet energy surged toward Xiaoan. Xiaoan looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "Am I going to die?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Silly girl, you are just a little weak, how can you die?" Xiaoan was about to speak, but the human face in the distance suddenly said, "Ignorant mortal, put down the holy venerate." Yi Xian looked at the human face, and the human face and Xiao Ta were entangled, and neither could do anything to the other. Yi Xian couldn't help but look at Xiao Ta. Damn. He realized that Xiao had concealed his strength earlier. The flame of the human face was extremely terrifying, and even he was slightly afraid of it. But now, Xiao Ta was actually able to fight it for so long. Obviously, Xiao had concealed his strength earlier. At this moment, the human face suddenly stopped, and it looked at Xiao Ta. "You stupid tower, you have some ability." Xiao Ta said indifferently, "Don't act tough in front of me. Let me tell you, I'm invincible under 3 strikes. I'll trade one for one above 3 strikes." As it spoke, it charged at the human face. Yi Xian's face was filled with black lines. Damn, why does Xiao Ta know how to act tough now? 1 for 1. Damn, this is too shameless. At this moment, Xiaoan suddenly looked at the human face. You are? The human face suddenly stopped, and it quickly said, "Holy Senior, I'm fired. I'm your most loyal subordinate." Yi Xian suddenly said, "Aren't you the subordinate of the number 1 deity in the world?" The human face said angrily, "Holy Senior is the number 1 deity in the world." Yi Xian turned to look at Xiaoan, and Xiaoan was confused. I don't know anything." Yi Xian looked at Xiao Ta, who still wanted to fight. "Xiao Ta, wait. Let me ask it." Xiao Ta snorted, and then retreated to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian looked at the human face. "How is Xiaoan the number 1 deity in the world? Can you tell me?" The human face said angrily, "You human, you don't deserve to talk to me." Yi Xian moved his mind, and the green profound sword flew out. Boom. The human was blasted 30 kilometers away by the green profound sword, and as soon as he stopped moving, he started to vanish at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Yi Xian did not hold back this time. In the distance, the disappearing human face's expression changed drastically. When it saw that Yi Xian was about to attack again, it hurriedly said, "Mortal, human, we gentlemen use our words, not our fists. Let's talk, don't fight." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Speak, I'm listening." The human face hesitated for a moment before saying, "Human, where did you get this sword?" Yi Xian was about to speak when Xiao Ta suddenly said, "I forged it." The human face was speechless. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1815. Hearing Xiao Ta's words, Yi Xian was a little speechless. This Xiao Ta was too shameless. Not far away, the human face said angrily, "How can you, a broken tower, create such a sword that transcends the rules?" Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta was instantly furious. "You are a snob. I am the #1 tower in the universe. My master is invincible. Invincible? The human face sneered. What a joke. In this world, even the holy venerable did not dare to say that he was invincible. Moreover, even if your master is invincible, what does that have to do with you? Xiaota said, my master is invincible. That means I am invincible. Understand? Yi Xian was speechless. The human face stared at Xiaota. You are so shameless. How can you say such things? Xiaota was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly smiled. Fire Lord of the Stars, you said that Xiaoan is a great sage, so why did she become like this? After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of the Stars said, because of some special reasons. Yi Xian asked, what special reasons? The Fire Lord of the Stars glanced at Yi Xian. Ordinary. With that, he glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and changed his wording. Human, there are some things that you are better off not knowing. Because it is not a level that you can reach now. After that, he paused and said, I am doing this for your own good. Yi Xian smiled. It seems that your background is really not ordinary. The Fire Lord of the Stars said proudly, of course. We are the earliest ancient gods in this universe. The real ancient gods, the kind that have broken away from the mortal body. Yi Xian smiled. Do you know the supreme laws of the universe? The Fire Lord of the Stars shook his head. No. Yi Xian was silent. It seemed that this guy in front of him was not from the same era as the supreme laws. At the thought of this, Yi Xian could not help but glance at Xiaoan beside him. The person he had randomly saved actually had such a powerful background. Xiaoan was clearly a big shot. At this time, Xiaoan suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and said softly, Big brother Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, Don't worry, I'm here. Xiaoan looked up at Yi Xian. After a while, she smiled. Before this moment, she was at a loss and uneasy. But at this moment, after hearing Yi Xian's words, she felt very safe. In the distance, the Fire Lord of Stars suddenly said, Human, you. Yi Xian suddenly interrupted the Fire Lord of Heaven's words. Your IQ is really low. Fire Lord flew into a rage. What do you mean by this? Yi Xian waved the Qingxian sword in his hand. Is there anyone in your era that can compare with this sword? The Fire Lord of Stars glanced at the Qingxian sword in Yi Xian's hand, his expression extremely ugly. Yi Xian smiled and said, Seems like there isn't anyone. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars said, Human, who made this sword? Yi Xian pointed at himself. Me. Xiaota was speechless. The Fire Lord of Stars looked at Yi Xian. I finally understand why that stupid tower is so shameless. It turns out that if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. Yi Xian was speechless. The Fire Lord of Stars said again, Human, I have long seen through your capabilities. With your current level, it is impossible for you to make this sword. Yi Xian smiled and said, Let's not talk about this. I just want to know why you and Xiaoan became like this. The Fire Lord of Stars said in a deep voice, Human, knowing some things is not good for you. Yi Xian looked at the Fire Lord of Stars and said, If it wasn't for Xiaoan's face, I would have crushed you with one sword. Don't talk to me about gods or not. I, Yi Xian, do not worship gods. As for you, I hope you can correct your attitude because my patience has a limit. If there is a next time, I will crush your soul. Hearing this, the Fire Lord of Stars' expression suddenly became somewhat ugly. At this time, Yi Xian's left thumb was already on the sword hilt. The Fire Lord of Stars looked at Yi Xian, but Yi Xian's expression was very calm, without any killing intent. But he knew that if he refuted, this human in front of him would not hesitate to kill him. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars said, Rebellion. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Rebellion? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded. If there are gods, then there are demons. Yi Xian said, You lost. The Fire Lord of Stars' expression became ferocious. Under normal circumstances, why would we be afraid of those ancient demons? It's just that we never thought that there would be traitors among us. Traitors? After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked again, Where are you? The Fire Lord of Stars said, Ancient God World. Yixian said, Is it far from here? The Fire Lord of Stars said, Very, very far. Moreover, the people of this universe cannot reach where we are. Because the people here are still limited by space-time, but where we are, we have already surpassed space-time. It can be said that if they do not jump out of the circle of space-time, they will never be able to reach where we are. Yixian nodded, I understand. Saying this, he turned to look at Xiaoan, You will follow me from now on. Xiaoan nodded quickly, Okay. The Fire Lord of Stars said quickly, Human, the Holy Venerable wants to kill his way back to the ancient God world. Yixian said indifferently, Kill his way back to the ancient God world like this? Are you out of your mind? The Fire Lord of Stars still wanted to say something, but Xiaoan suddenly said, You said you are my subordinate? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded quickly, Yes. Xiaoan said, Then what I say, will you listen to me? The Fire Lord of Stars smiled bitterly, Of course. Xiaoan looked at the Fire Lord of Stars, From now on, you have to respect Big Brother Yixian. The Fire Lord of Stars glanced at Yixian. He was about to speak when Xiaoan said, Do you have any questions? The Fire Lord of Stars was silent for a moment, then said, This subordinate has no questions. Just, Holy Venerable, forgive me for saying too much, but if he is with you, he will kill himself. He is not on the same level as us. Shut up. Xiaoan suddenly interrupted the Fire Lord of Stars' words. The Fire Lord of Stars was startled and quickly lowered his head. Holy Venerable, Xiaoan stared at the Fire Lord of Stars. I don't know how strong we used to be, but I know that the current us does not have the qualifications to be arrogant in front of Big Brother Yixian. When we don't have strength, shouldn't we put away our arrogance? Hearing this, Yixian could not help but look at Xiaoan, sighing in his heart. This Xiaoan was really not ordinary. But that's right, he's a super big shot after all. After a moment of silence, the Fire Lord of Stars bowed slightly. This subordinate understands. Xiaoan nodded slightly. You just told me that in my previous life I was, the Fire Lord of Stars said, not in your previous life. Holy Venerable, you just sealed your own memory and strength. Xiaoan said in a deep voice, Is it to avoid those demons? The Fire Lord of Stars nodded, Yes. After a long silence, Xiaoan turned to look at Yixian. Big Brother Yixian, if you let me follow you, then in the future, I may implicate you. Yixian was silent. As Xiaoan said, if he brought her along, there would be a lot of trouble in the future. Xiaoan tightly held Yixian's hand, a little nervous. After a moment, Yixian smiled and said, Before you recover your memory, you are my sister. And after you recover your memory, we will talk about it at that time. What do you say? Xiaoan quickly nodded. Yixian laughed. Then you can stay in the tower first. This place is isolated from the outside world, very safe. Xiaoan nodded. Okay. After a moment, Yixian came to a quiet place. He decided to open the sword imprint left by his big brother. As soon as he opened it, countless information poured into his mind. After a moment, Yixian's mouth slightly raised. It was a sword skill. The sword skill was seeking death. This sword skill was seeking death. This was a sword skill left by his big brother. The core of this sword skill was seeking death. With this sword, I beg you to let me die. After careful study, Yixian found that it was not so much a sword technique as a belief in the doctrine of the sword. Seeking death. At this moment, he felt the loneliness of his big brother. Being invincible was really a kind of loneliness. There were two opponents, but they could not fight for the time being. Very lonely, very painful. This sword skill, seeking death, had two cores. One was attitude, the other was momentum. It was very difficult to learn. It was the most difficult of the three sword skills to learn. Because only when one was really seeking death could one unleash the true power of this sword skill. If one did not have the desire to die, the power of this sword skill was really ordinary. And if one had the desire to die, the power of this sword skill had no upper limit. The stronger the desire to die, the more powerful this sword skill was. Yi Xian sighed softly. This sword skill was used in desperate situations. Because under normal circumstances, who would have the desire to die? He was not his big brother, who wanted to be killed every day. In other words, this sword skill was most likely to be used in desperate situations. That kind of desperate situation where one only wanted to die. Of course, he did not want to have such a situation, but he still had to cultivate, in case there was a time when it would be useful. In the following time, Yi Xian began to concentrate on studying this sword skill. Anyway, in this xiaota, there was enough time. While Yi Xian was cultivating, God's graveyard was not idle either. God's graveyard used all its strength to search for the woman in the plain dress. Anyone who provided any information about the woman in the plain dress would be severely injured. Other than that, God's graveyard's internal information system was activated, and they began to search for the woman in the plain dress. After searching for an entire half a month, they'd finally found information about the woman in a simple dress. God's graveyard. A silhouette landed in front of a graveyard, bowed respectfully, and said excitedly, "Senior Yu, we have news about the woman in the plain dress." There was news. As soon as he finished speaking, the tomb suddenly trembled, and then Venerable Yu walked out. Senior Yu looked at the silhouette. "News about the woman?" The silhouette nodded. "Yes." Senior Yu closed his eyes slowly, and a smile appeared on his face. "Yi Xian, your good days are over. P.S. Asking for votes. Asking for votes. Asking for votes." Chapter 1816. Lord Yu withdrew his gaze and said, "Where is the woman?" The shadow said in a deep voice, "She is a little far from here. She appeared in the faraway Nightmare Star realm." Venerable Yu frowned. "Nightmare Galaxy?" The phantom nodded. "Yes." Venerable Yu said solemnly, "So far. Nightmare Galaxy realm. It was a place very, very far away from here. They had only heard of it but had never been there. Because it was too far. Although the graveyard of the gods was powerful, they did not have the ambition to unify the entire universe. Thus, they were somewhat unfamiliar with the other parts of the universe. Nightmare Galaxy realm. Venerable Yu said after a moment of silence, "Send someone to the Nightmare Galaxy, we must capture this woman." The phantom bowed slightly. "Understood." With that, he was about to leave when a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Wait." The two of them turned around and saw the Left Hall Master slowly walking over. Left Hall Master looked at Left Hall Master Yu. "To ensure that nothing goes wrong, you have to go personally." Venerable Yu thought about it and nodded. "All right." The Left Hall Master said, "Yi Xian isn't a simple person. His sister shouldn't be a weakling either. Don't be careless and underestimate her. Be careful not to fail miserably." Venerable Yu nodded. "Of course." The Left Hall Master continued, "That's right. What is Yi Xian doing now?" The figure said, "He is in closed-door cultivation." After a moment of silence, the Left Hall Master said, "Venerable Yu, you must be quick. We can't give Yi Xian too much time. His rate of growth is too terrifying." Venerable Yu nodded. "Understood." With that, he turned around and walked into the splendid hall. Not long after, he asked for another wooden token. Because of the restriction of the laws outside, he needed the help of a supreme being to get out. Before long, Venerable Yu led a group of experts from the graveyard of gods and headed straight for the Nightmare Galaxy. At this moment, Yi Xian still didn't know that the people from the graveyard of the gods had gone looking for Qing'er. At this moment, he was still crazily cultivating his sword, seeking death. The more he cultivated, the more he found this sword skill interesting. One sword seeking death. Putting everything else aside, this sword skill sounded very domineering. When fighting with others, he would shout, "One sword seeking death." He could suppress his opponent with his aura alone. While he was cultivating, the Fire Lord of the North had been helping Xiaoan recover her memories every day. Xiaoan didn't object because she didn't want to be a useless person. As for Yi Xian, the Fire Lord of God was much more polite now because he realized that not only was Yi Xian's sword extraordinary, But Xiaoda was also extraordinary. It was completely different from the space-time outside. This was a little terrifying. Under normal circumstances, such a divine object should not exist in such a place. Therefore, he was quite curious about Yi Xian's background. Time passed bit by bit, and in the blink of an eye, several years had passed. In the past few years, Yi Xian had improved greatly in all aspects, especially his sword skills. It could be said that he had already stacked draw sword to determine life and death from 820 to 880. This was his current limit. The only way to reach 1000 was to become a minor saint. Now, he had just stabilized his realm and didn't want to become a minor saint. It wasn't a good thing to increase one's cultivation realm too quickly. More haste, less speed. Besides draw sword to determine life and death, his head lift technique had improved greatly as well. In terms of speed and power, it was at least 3 times stronger than before. In the past, his flying sword technique couldn't pose any real threat to ancient god realm experts. But now, his flying sword could pose a lethal threat to ancient god realm experts. All in all, his current strength had taken a qualitative leap compared to before. Ancient god realm experts weren't a threat to him anymore. Of course, his goal wasn't ancient god realm experts anymore. Yi Xian left Xiao Ta and went to the pavilion. As soon as he arrived, the pavilion master appeared before him. The pavilion master spoke in a low voice. "Brother Yi, I've received news that your sister seems to have been found in the god's graveyard." Yi Xian was stunned. "You found Qing?" The pavilion master nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "How amazing!" The pavilion master was speechless. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He really hadn't expected that he would actually find Qing in the god's graveyard. Needless to say, it was truly amazing. Because even he couldn't contact Qing, he hadn't expected that he would actually find her in the god's graveyard. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Where?" The pavilion master spoke in a low voice, "In the distant Nightmare Starfield." Nightmare Starfield. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. "I've never heard of it." The pavilion master laughed bitterly. "It's very, very far away. For us, it's a completely foreign star domain." Yi Xian smiled. "Give me an address." The pavilion master frowned slightly. "You're going to rescue your sister?" Yi Xian blinked and said, "Yes. I'm going to rescue my sister." Xiao Ta was speechless. Xiao Lu's house lord said solemnly, "Brother Yi, the one going this time might be an ancient god realm master." Yi Xian frowned. "Only one?" The pavilion master was shocked. "What, isn't that enough?" Yi Xian muttered softly. "Why don't they send a few more?" When the pavilion master heard Yi Xian's words, he was completely dumbfounded. "Brother Yi, you want them to send more ancient god?" Yi Xian blinked and then smiled. "Of course not." Saying so, he stood up and said, "Pavilion master, give me the address of the Nightmare Starfield. I need to hurry and rescue my sister. I'm afraid I'll be too late. My sister's life is in danger." Xiao Ta was speechless. The pavilion master nodded. "Indeed." Saying so, he pointed a finger and a white light entered Yi Xian's forehead. Soon, a lot of information entered Yi Xian's mind. At the side, the pavilion master said, "Brother Yi, you have to hurry. Otherwise, your sister's life is in danger. An ancient god realm master is no joke." Yi Xian quickly nodded. "Sit. Goodbye, pavilion master." Saying so, he turned and flew on his sword. The pavilion master looked at the horizon. After a long time, he said softly, "If the god's graveyard really captures Brother Ye's sister, then Brother Ye's situation." Saying so, deep worry appeared in his eyes. This time, the god's graveyard had paid a huge price to find Yi Xian's sister. The enemy would definitely capture Yi Xian's sister at all costs and use her to threaten Yi Xian. At that time, Yi Xian's situation would become extremely difficult. After leaving the pavilion, Yi Xian used the profound azure sword to travel through time and space to the Nightmare Starfield. In fact, Yi Xian was also a little excited. He also wanted to see Qing. He hadn't seen her for a long time. He wondered how she was doing now. His longing grew stronger and stronger. Inside Xiaota's house, Xiaoan was walking slowly by a river. Beside her was the Fire Lord of the North. Although Fire Lord didn't particularly like Yi Xian and Xiaota, he still respected Xiaoan very much. Xiaoan suddenly said, "Fire Lord, I've been feeling a little uneasy lately." Fire Lord's expression changed. "Holy Venerable, you really feel a little uneasy?" Xiaoan nodded. "Yes. I even feel a little flustered sometimes." Fire Lord's expression turned ugly. "Could it be that the ancient devil and the others have found us?" "It shouldn't be. This place is so far from the ancient devil realm. It's impossible for them to find this place." Xiaoan said in a low voice, "I also don't know why I feel this way." Fire Lord hesitated for a moment and then said, "Holy Venerable, you still can't recover all your memories?" Xiaoan shook her head. "There are some fragmented memories in my mind, but they are very messy. I can't gather them all." Fire Lord sighed. "It must be the sequela of that year." Xiaoan smiled. "Was I defeated that year?" Fire Lord said angrily, "How is that possible? If you hadn't been ambushed by your own people, how could you have lost to that ancient devil?" Then, his expression turned ferocious. "It's all that damn bitch's fault. She actually ambushed Holy Venerable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have lost that year." Xiaoan chuckled. "That's still a loss." Fire Lord hurriedly said, "No, if it was a one-on-one fight, even the ancient devil realm's #1 devil might not be able to defeat Holy Venerable. It's all that bitch's fault. She failed to live up to Holy Venerable's trust." Xiaoan looked at Fire Lord. "Who is this she you speak of?" After a moment of silence, Fire Lord said, "Holy Venerable, one of your former subordinates. You trust her a lot. And you trust her the most." After a moment of silence, Xiaoan said softly, "I understand." Fire Lord said fiercely, "When Holy Venerable recovers your memories, we will kill our way to the ancient god world and kill that woman with our own hands." Xiaoan chuckled. "Let's talk about that later." Fire Lord said in a deep voice, "Holy Venerable, you have to stay away from that human." Xiaoan was puzzled. Fire Lord said in a deep voice, "You are a god, he is immortal." Xiaoan shook his head. "Fire Lord, Brother Yi Xian is not simple." Fire Lord said, "It's his sword that is not simple. He is very ordinary." Xiaoan asked, "If he was very ordinary, why would the sword recognize him as its master?" Fire Lord was silent. Xiaoan smiled. "Brother Yi Xian is very good to his own people, but not to others. Be more respectful to him in the future. Otherwise, even if Big Brother Yi Xian doesn't kill you, I won't let you off once I recover my memory." With that, she walked off into the distance. Fire Lord of the South smiled bitterly. In an unknown galaxy, Zun Yu led a group of God's graveyard experts through space and time. Their destination was the Nightmare Starfield. Venerable Yu looked at the endless starfield in the distance. "Yi Xian, your doomsday is here." Beside him, an old man suddenly said, "What if that Yi Xian doesn't save his sister?" Master Yu sneered. "He will definitely save her. Because this person was very sentimental. This is his weakness." Chapter 1817. An hour later, Venerable Yu's group entered Nightmare Starfield. After entering, Venerable Yu sized up the surroundings and asked, "Bai Yi, do you know anything about this place?" The old man called Bai Yi, who stood behind Venerable Yu, answered solemnly, "A little, but not much." Venerable Yu said, "Tell me." Bai Yi said solemnly, "There's a powerful force in this starfield, the White Chalk family, and they control the entire Nightmare Starfield. There's a special kind of spiritual energy here, the energy of life, and it's not inferior to the energy of eternal life." Venerable Yu asked, "Have you come into contact with them?" Bai Yi nodded, "I have. These fellows aren't very friendly." Venerable Yu fell silent for a moment. "Ignore them, our target is that plain-dressed woman." Bai Yi nodded and pointed ahead. "According to our scouts, That plain-dressed woman appeared in Martial Spirit City not long ago. Venerable Yu said, "Let's go to Martial Spirit City." Right at this time, a powerful aura suddenly swept over from afar. Venerable Yu frowned, and it didn't take long for an old man to appear in front of him. The old man wore a gray robe, and his hands were hidden in his sleeves. Wrinkles crisscrossed on his face, and he looked very old. The old man's eyes narrowed. An ancient god realm expert. Venerable Yu nodded. This gray-robed old man wasn't an ancient god realm expert. Whether it was ancient god Starfield or nightmare Starfield, both were bound by the supreme laws of the universe. The old man stared fixedly at the gray-robed old man. "Since you've stepped into the ancient god realm, why are you still able to appear in this world?" Venerable Yu said indifferently, "Have you heard of God's graveyard?" The old man frowned. "God's graveyard?" Venerable Yu nodded. The old man asked solemnly, "What are you doing in Nightmare Starfield?" Venerable Yu smiled. "Don't worry, we're here to look for someone. We have no other intentions." The old man's eyes were still slightly guarded. "Who are you looking for?" Venerable Yu said, "A woman in plain dress." As he spoke, he turned to look at Bai Yi. Bai Yi waved his right hand lightly, and a portrait of the woman appeared before them. Venerable Yu looked at the old man. "Do you know this person?" The old man looked at the portrait of the woman in the plain dress. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head. "I've never seen her before." Venerable Yu said in a low voice, "This woman appeared in Lingwu City before. We are going to Lingwu City now. I hope you can help us." After a moment of silence, the old man said, "All right." An ancient god realm master wasn't scary. What was scary was an ancient god realm master that could appear in this world. This meant that the other party must have received help from a supreme martial artist. Otherwise, there was no way he could have come out. Moreover, the graveyard of the gods was also a superpower. It would be beneficial to do them a favor. Under the old man's lead, the group arrived at Lingwu City. In front of the city gate, the old man said in a low voice, "Everyone, this spirit martial city is the capital of our nightmare tribe. Do not fight within the city." Venerable Yu smiled. "Of course." The old man nodded and led Venerable Yu and the others into the city. In the city, Venerable Yu turned and looked at Bei. "Search." White Knight nodded slightly, then disappeared with the experts of the graveyard of gods behind him. Venerable Yu looked at the old man. Just as he was about to speak, a voice came from the distance. "An honored guest has arrived." Venerable Yu looked in the distance. Not far away, a middle-aged man was walking towards them. Beside Venerable Yu, the Nightmare Tribe's old man quickly introduced, "Sir, this is our Nightmare Tribe's patriarch, Nightmare Abyss." Nightmare Abyss. Venerable Yu cupped his fists in greeting, "Patriarch Nightmare Abyss." Nightmare Abyss nodded. "I've heard of the graveyard of gods, but I've never been there." Venerable Yu smiled. "Patriarch Nightmare Abyss, you don't visit without a reason. I'm here to look for a woman." Nightmare Abyss frowned. "A woman?" Venerable Yu nodded. "That person has a grudge with our graveyard of gods, so she fled here." He cupped his fists in greeting. "I humbly request Patriarch Nightmare Abyss's assistance." Nightmare Abyss fell silent for a moment, then looked at the old man beside him. "Nightmare Forest, pass down my order, search for this woman." Nightmare Forest nodded. "Understood." With that he turned and left. Nightmare Abyss looked at Venerable Yu, smiling. "Venerable, how strong is this woman?" Venerable Yu frowned. He really didn't know how strong that woman was. Nightmare Abyss looked at Venerable Yu. "Very strong?" Venerable Yu smiled. "No matter how strong she is, she's only a great saint." Nightmare Abyss nodded. "That's true." Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for an ancient god realm cultivator to appear outside. Since the woman was outside, there was only one explanation. She had not reached the ancient god realm. Venerable Yu added, "Although she's a great saint, don't underestimate her. Leader of the Nightmarish Abyss tribe, if your people find her, you must be careful. It's best if you come and inform me directly." Nightmare Abyss nodded. "Understood." he made an inviting gesture. Venerable, please enter the hall and rest for a while. I will inform Venerable when there's news. Venerable Yu nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you. The group walked away. After Venerable Yu's group left, a man appeared on the street. This person was none other than Yi Xian, who had chased after them. With the azure profound sword, traveling through space was a walk in the park. Moreover, now that he knew the exact location of this place, he could come to this place at any time. Yi Xian looked around, then opened his palm, revealing the azure profound sword. Xiao Hun, can you feel Qing Er's aura? Xiao Hun fell silent for a moment, then answered, I can't. Yi Xian frowned. You can't feel it either? Xiao Hun answered, I can't. Yi Xian's voice was solemn. Is it because Qing Er isn't here? Xiao Hun answered, That's possible. Yi Xian looked into the distance. The people in the Tomb of God said that Qing Er appeared here. It shouldn't be false. As he spoke, he looked around and frowned slightly. Could it be that she has already left this place? Moreover, he didn't quite understand one thing. Didn't Qing Er, his father, and the others go to an unknown universe? Suddenly, Xiao Hun said excitedly, Young Lord, I can feel Big Sister Tianming's aura. Yi Xian hurried to ask, Where is it? Xiao Hun suddenly pointed to the right. Over there. Yi Xian grabbed Xiao Hun, then vanished on the spot. Almost at the same time, Venerable Yu suddenly stood up, found her. With that, he led the experts of the Tomb of Gods in the hall and vanished on the spot. The nightmare abyss hesitated for a moment, then followed them out. Somewhere in the sky, Yi Xian was flying on his sword, and he was very excited. I can finally see Qing. Right at this moment, a horrifying aura suddenly swept over from his right. Yi Xian turned to look, and it was Venerable Yu and the others. Seeing Yi Xian, Venerable Yu was slightly stunned, then he narrowed his eyes. Yi Xian. Yi Xian suddenly said fiercely, Venerable Yu, you always target me and my sister. What kind of man are you? Venerable Yu laughed. Yi Xian, it seems you care about your sister a lot. Yi Xian stared at Venerable Yu. Venerable Yu, you are an ancient god realm expert. Don't you think it's beneath you to act like this? Venerable Yu shook his head. Yi Xian, you forced me to do this. If I didn't capture your sister, would you have obediently given in? Yi Xian said solemnly, I won't let you succeed. Venerable Yu laughed. That's not up to you. Venerable Yu increased his speed. He didn't choose to attack Yi Xian because he knew that even if Yi Xian couldn't defeat them, if Yi Xian wanted to escape, they wouldn't be able to stop him even if they joined hands. Thus, he had to capture Yi Xian's sister first. As Venerable Yu and the others increased their speed, Yi Xian also increased his speed. Shortly after, everyone arrived at the foot of a mountain, and the malevolent abyss appeared before Venerable Yu and the rest. The nightmare abyss looked at Venerable Yu with a faint smile. Venerable, if there's anything you need, just say the word. Behind him were more than a dozen great sage realm super experts. On the side, Yi Xian glanced at the nightmare abyss, not saying a word. Venerable Yu smiled. Many thanks. He looked at the top of the mountain, and in the next moment he appeared at the top of the mountain. At the same time, everyone else also appeared. At the top of the mountain was a small grass hut, and two people were sitting in front of it. A woman and an old man. The old man had white hair and an extremely aged face, and it was unknown how long he had lived. The woman was the woman in a plain dress. A chessboard was placed before them. Yi Xian smiled when he saw the woman in a plain dress. It really is Qing. But it didn't take long for Yi Xian to frown because he noticed that the Qing before him wasn't her real body. It was just a clone. At this moment, Qing, who was in the distance, suddenly turned around. She threw Yi Xian a look and smiled. Brother! Yi Xian walked towards Qing and wanted to ask her about it. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu appeared near Qing and opened his palm, and two pieces of paper suddenly floated into the air. Divine paper! The two pieces of paper turned blood red as soon as they floated in the air, and then an extremely terrifying force appeared in the surroundings. Yi Xian frowned. These two pieces of paper are much more terrifying than the ones that Venerable Yu took out earlier. The treasures in the graveyard of the gods were truly extraordinary. The woman in the plain dress glanced at the two pieces of paper that had turned blood red. Her expression was calm. At this time, Venerable Yu looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Yi Xian, do you know what this is? Yi Xian shook his head. I don't know. Venerable Yu said, this is a godly paper from the ancient times. It was used by God Emperor. Not only does it contain the supreme Tao, it also has a strand of godly power. True divine power. If an ancient God Realm Master were to act, this paper could easily kill an ancient God Realm Master. As he spoke, he smiled faintly. Yi Xian, as long as I move my mind, your sister will be incinerated into nothingness on the spot. Let me ask you, are you afraid or not? Yi Xian glanced at Venerable Yu. I'm so scared. I've never been so scared before. P.S. Horse at the end of last month. Vote for me if you still have tickets. The top 10 would get 1,000 yuan prize. To me, this is a huge fortune. Please. Chapter 1818. Venerable Yu couldn't help but roar with laughter when he heard Yi Xian. Just as he expected, Yi Xian really was a loyal person. So long as he used his sister as a hostage, Yi Xian would definitely give in. I can finally deal with this troublesome fellow. Right at this moment, the white-haired old man suddenly said, This paper seems to be mine. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings looked at the white-haired old man. Venerable Yu looked at the old man as well. He sized the old man up but couldn't see through him, so he frowned. Who are you? The old man grinned. You're using the paper I left behind, yet you're asking me who I am. Venerable Yu was stunned, and then he ridiculed. Your paper? The old man nodded. It is indeed mine. Venerable Yu roared with laughter. How laughable! Do you know that this paper was left behind by a true God Emperor? What? Are you the God Emperor? The old man frowned slightly and replied with a question. Why can't I be the God Emperor? Venerable Yu was stunned, and then he roared with laughter. The old man was quite speechless. Meanwhile, the Nightmare Abyss spoke abruptly. You said you're the God Emperor? The old man glanced at the Nightmare Abyss. What? The Nightmare Abyss smiled. According to my knowledge, there isn't a God Emperor in this universe anymore. The old man stroked his beard and smiled. There is, but all of you can't come into contact with him. The Nightmare Abyss was about to speak when Venerable Yu spoke abruptly. How absurd! A God Emperor hasn't appeared in this universe for hundreds of thousands of years, yet you're actually saying that you're the God Emperor? Isn't that too laughable? The old man shook his head and sighed. Junior, I notice that your forehead is dark and there's a ferocious aura between your brows. I'm afraid you won't live long. Yet you're still laughing here. The old man is speechless. Venerable Yu smiled. I won't live long? The old man nodded. Yes. Venerable Yu roared with laughter. Besides those exalts, who else in this world can kill me? The white-haired old man sighed softly. Why is your generation so stupid? Venerable Yu stared at the white-haired elder. Will you die if you don't act? As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve, and a powerful force swept towards the white-haired old man. However, before that force could approach the white-haired old man, it disappeared without a trace. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they witnessed this scene, including Venerable Yu. He wasn't an idiot. The moment his power disappeared without a trace, he knew that something was wrong. Sovereign Yu hesitated for a moment and said, Senior, I offended you just now. The white-haired old man laughed and said, You're not hopelessly stupid. Venerable Yu said solemnly, Qian Bei, the target of our god's graveyard is this woman. We have no intention of offending you. The white-haired old man fell silent for a moment before he said, I take back what I said just now. Zun Yu, the white-haired old man looked at the plain-dressed woman in front of him. Senior, I've lost this game of chess. Senior? Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Venerable Yu was stunned. Why did he address her as senior? She glanced at the white-haired old man. Since you've lost, then die. The white-haired old man laughed bitterly. Senior, I don't want to die. The woman's face remained emotionless. It was you who came looking for me. The white-haired old man's smile grew even more bitter. I didn't know that Senior was so strong. The woman in the plain dress waved her hand slightly, and the chessboard in front of her disappeared. She turned around to look at Yixian, who was not far away. I was going to look for you with this doppelganger as soon as I finished this. I didn't expect you to come to me. A clone. Venerable Yu's expression instantly changed when he heard her. You? You're just a clone. He wasn't able to discern her true strength at all. The reason Yixian was able to discern her true strength was because he was truly too familiar with Qing, but this Qing gave him a slightly different feeling. Of course, while it was just a clone, it was still Qing. The woman paid no attention to Venerable Yu and walked towards Yixian. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu spoke ferociously, "You're courting death." As soon as he finished speaking, he chanted in his heart. In an instant, the two blood-red pieces of paper in the sky started burning. At the same time, two rays of red light enveloped the woman, but she was completely unharmed. She raised her head and glanced at the two pieces of paper. In the next moment, they shook violently and vanished into nothingness. Venerable Yu's face instantly turned pale when he witnessed this scene, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. How could this be possible? The white-haired old man shook his head and sighed. My God! Who gave you the courage to do that? The woman suddenly looked towards Nightmare Abyss, and his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly bowed respectfully. Senior, I have nothing to do with the god's tomb. I'm just passing by. He wasn't stupid, and he'd naturally noticed how terrifying the woman was. Venerable Yu was an ancient god realm expert. Moreover, he'd even activated a divine artifact, but the woman was completely unharmed. What did this mean? It meant that she was far stronger than an ancient god realm expert. The woman looked at Yixian. Do you recognize him? Yixian glanced at Nightmare Abyss and shook his head. I don't. He paused for a moment before continuing. He just said that he's willing to help the god's tomb eliminate me. The woman's brows raised slightly. Is that so? As she spoke, she glanced at the Nightmare Abyss. Kill my brother. Nightmare Abyss spoke solemnly. Senior, my Nightmare tribe has nothing to do with the god's tomb. My Nightmare tribe will no longer interfere in the matter between Senior and the god's tomb. Farewell. He turned around and left as soon as he finished speaking. But at this moment, something strange happened. Before anyone could react, a sword pierced through Nightmare Abyss's forehead. Everyone present was stunned. The woman looked at Nightmare Abyss. Did I say you could leave? Nightmare Abyss's voice trembled. Senior, leave a way out and we'll meet again in the future. The woman shook her head. I'll kill anyone who harbors ill intent towards my brother. She waved her hand lightly as soon as she finished speaking. Bang! Nightmare Abyss's entire body was obliterated. He completely vanished from this world. The expressions of the experts from the Nightmare tribe changed drastically, and one of them said angrily, Aren't you going too far? The woman looked at the old man. You're not satisfied? The old man said angrily, My Nightmare tribe has a supremacy backing them as well. Supremacy? The woman frowned slightly. What kind of trash is that? Everyone was speechless. The old man stared fixedly at the woman. How dare you look down on a supremacy? The woman shook her head. Call him over? The old man said angrily, What ability do you have to make a supremacy act against you? His head flew into the air, and his voice stopped abruptly. It wasn't the woman who attacked, but Yixian. The woman looked at Yixian, and Yixian smiled. This is a sword technique that I created. Qing, what do you think? The woman hesitated for a moment, and then she said, Not bad. Not bad. These words were obviously not true. Yixian laughed. Qing, let's talk somewhere else. Don't let them waste our time. Nodded. All right. Right at this moment, one of the experts from the Nightmare tribe shouted angrily, Don't leave if you have the guts. Yixian looked at the Nightmare tribe expert. What do you want to do? The expert sneered. Do you dare to wait here for a moment? I'll go back and call for reinforcements. Yi Xian. On the other side, the white-haired old man shook his head. My God, this old man's IQ is so high that he's going to blind me. At this moment, the woman suddenly turned to look at the white-haired old man, who hurriedly said, Senior, I was rude before. Before meeting you, the old man had always thought that he had reached the peak of martial arts. But now that I've met you, I realize that I've been a frog in a well. The woman looked at the white-haired old man. Whether I kill you or not depends on my brother. The white-haired old man hurriedly looked at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young friend, please put in a few good words for me. Yi Xian smiled faintly. I can't accept such a bow from you, senior. The white-haired old man laughed bitterly. Of course you can. Because my life and death are in your hands. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, I have no enmity with you, senior, so I naturally don't want you to die. Actually, he understood what Qing meant. It was creating an opportunity for him to make the old man owe him a favor. Otherwise, with Qing's personality, if he really wanted to kill this old man, he would have done so a long time ago. When he heard Yi Xian's words, Qing nodded slightly. Then I won't kill you. The white-haired old man instantly heaved a sigh of relief, and then he bowed once more. Thank you, senior, for not killing me. As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian. I'll definitely repay your kindness in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to leave. Meanwhile, Venerable Yu suddenly spoke with a trembling voice. Didn't you say that you're a god emperor? The white-haired old man gazed at Venerable Yu. Yes. Is there a problem? Venerable Yu was puzzled. If you really are a god emperor, then why are you so humble to her? The white-haired old man smiled. What do you think? Venerable Yu spoke furiously. You're not a god emperor. The white-haired old man opened his palm, and there was a piece of white paper there. He chanted a few words in his heart, and it didn't take long for the paper to start trembling. Gradually, a trace of extremely terrifying energy could be sensed within the paper. The energy of a god emperor. Venerable Yu felt like he'd been struck by a heavy blow, and his mind went blank. The white-haired old man smiled. Do you know why I'm still alive? It's not that I'm strong. There are many who are stronger and more talented than me. However, most of them were dead. The reason why I've come this far is because I've always remembered a principle. That is, as a person, no matter when, you can't be too arrogant. You must always leave some leeway. When it's time to be a coward, you must be a coward. There's nothing wrong with being humble. With that, he turned around and left. Chapter 1819. When the white-haired old man left, his face was full of smiles. In fact, before meeting the plain-dressed woman, he had already started to feel complacent. Because in this universe, there was basically no one who could match him. But after meeting the plain-dressed woman, he once again emptied himself. The current him had undergone an earth-shattering change. He had a chance to climb to the next level. Today, he had been reborn from the ashes. In the distance, Venerable Yu seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at the plain-dressed woman, staring fixedly at her. After calming down, he finally realized how extraordinary this woman was. Although it was only an avatar, the feeling this woman gave him was like the vast universe, unfathomable. She's stronger than God Emperor? The moment this thought appeared in his mind, Venerable Yu felt it was ridiculous. Was it possible? But if she wasn't stronger than God Emperor, why would God Emperor respect her so much? Gradually, Venerable Yu's face turned ugly. His rationality told him that this woman was definitely stronger than the white-haired old man. Right at this moment, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly swept down from the sky. An ancient god realm master. Yi Xian raised his head and saw a shadow appear in the sky. The ancient god realm master of the Nightmare tribe had come out. But it wasn't his main body that had come. It was just a shadow. In the sky, the ancient god realm master looked down at the Qing below. Don't you think you're a little too ruthless? The plain-dressed woman looked at the ancient god realm master. Who are you? The shadow answered, Nightmare Lin, the Grand Elder of the Nightmare Tribe. The plain-dressed woman nodded. Where is the Nightmare Tribe? This was the question she wanted to ask. The shadow stared at the plain-dressed woman, sneering, What, you want to annihilate my Nightmare Tribe? The plain-dressed woman said, Point me in a direction? The shadow pointed to the right. Go to Lingwu City, 1,000,000 li away. The plain-dressed woman opened her palm, revealing the profound azure sword. Go! The moment her voice fell, the profound azure sword flew out. In the sky above Lingwu City, the profound azure sword fell straight down. Boom! When the sword fell, the entire Lingwu City was wiped out. And at this moment, the green profound sword directly absorbed nearly 1,000,000 souls. Not far from Qing'e, the figure suddenly turned his head. In the next moment, his eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, he was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye, because his real body was gone. On the other side, Venerable Yu's eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, his heart was filled with fear. This woman had really annihilated the nightmares with a single slash. At this moment, he believed that the white-haired elder was God Emperor. He believed that this woman was even more terrifying than God Emperor. The reason why this woman could exist in this world was because she was stronger than a supreme being. The laws of the universe could not bind her at all. The graveyard of the gods was finished. Venerable Yu's face was pale. She glanced at the illusory figure of the nightmarish tribe. She opened her palm, and the Qingxian sword appeared in her hand. The sword's aura began to surge madly. In that split second, she absorbed the souls of more than 10 ancient god realm masters, and the number of masters below the ancient god realm was uncountable. What a windfall! The illusory figure stared at Qing'e with a vicious expression. You annihilated my nightmarish tribe with a single thought. You will be punished by the heavens for your actions. At this moment, Venerable Yu suddenly said softly, The heavens cannot punish her. This kind of expert had surpassed the supreme laws of the universe. How could the heavens punish her? The woman in the plain dress pulled Yixian's hand and turned to walk away. The illusory figure suddenly roared in anger, I curse you to die a horrible death. Qing'e stopped abruptly and turned to look at the illusory figure. If curses work, why do we still cultivate? The illusory figure wanted to say something else, but Qing'e waved her hand and turned him into nothingness. The nightmarish tribe had completely disappeared from this world. Qing'e turned to look at Venerable Yu. Qing'e suddenly waved her sleeves. Boom! Venerable Yu and the others were wiped out in an instant. Killed in an instant. She didn't even give them a chance to speak. Qing'e pulled Yixian away. Along the way, Qing'e suddenly asked, Are you wondering why I'm here? Yixian nodded. Yes. Qing'e said, If you hadn't come, I would have killed that old man. Yixian didn't understand. Why? Qing'e said, He's already half a step out of this universe. He's a huge threat to you. Yixian hesitated, then said, So you want to kill him? Looked at Yixian. Yes. Yixian smiled bitterly. Qing'e, you don't have to do this. Let me walk the rest of the way alone. If I really can't win, you can help me. How about that? Qing'e nodded after a moment of silence. All right. Yixian said softly, My goal is to surpass you, big brother and dad. So, let me walk the rest of the way alone. Said, Just surpass me. Yixian didn't understand. Why? Said, Surpassing me means surpassing them. Yixian was speechless. Yixian hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Qing'e, tell me honestly. Who's stronger, you father and big brother? In fact, he was really curious about Qing'e, dad, and big brother's strength. Out of the three, who was more powerful? Said calmly, Ask them next time. Yixian smiled bitterly. Qing'e suddenly stopped moving. She raised her head to look towards the horizon and said softly, My main body has already left this universe. Yixian said after a slight hesitation, Is it very far? Qing nodded. As you are now, you can't leave this universe. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Qing blurted out. Because it's weak. As she spoke, she hesitated for a moment before she said, this universe is weak. Yi Xian, Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. It's because I'm going to leave that I'm worried about you. That's why I left this avatar. Yi Xian said with a smile, I am very strong now too. Nodded, much stronger than before. Yi Xian smiled. Don't worry, Qing. I'll take care of myself from now on. Her smiled. Good. As she spoke, she glanced into Yi Xian's body and said, there seem to be two unfamiliar existences in the pagoda. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Xiaoda suddenly said, Big Sister Tianming, there's a very arrogant fire in the tower. I said you're invincible, but he ridiculed me and said you can't be invincible. Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Xiaoan and Fire appeared. Xiaoan glanced at Qing, hesitated for a moment, and then bowed slightly. Big Sister. Fire suddenly said, Holy Venerable, what does she have to make you bow to her? Meanwhile, Xiaoda snickered. This idiot Fire is about to be taught a lesson. Tiger glanced at Fire. What do I have to make her? Fire looked at Qing. She's a holy venerable and she's beyond mortals. What about you? Qing flicked her sleeve. Bang. A ray of sword energy pierced through Fire, and in an instant, Fire started vanishing at a visible speed. At this moment, Fire was horrified, and his eyes were filled with terror. You, Xiaoan hurriedly bowed respectfully. Big Sister, please spare his life. Qing looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he smiled. Qing, forget it. We're brother and sister, so let's not kill each other anymore. Nodded, and then she opened her palm. A ray of sword energy suddenly flew out from within Fire's body, and then it fell firmly into Qing's palm. Glanced at Fire, who was still in shock. The so-called gods of this world have only given themselves titles. Childish and laughable. Fire spoke in a low voice. Your strength is extraordinary, and I'm not a match for you. However, I'm not convinced that you look down on gods like this. Yi Xian suddenly said, Fire, Qing doesn't need you to obey. Fire said in a low voice, you look down on gods like this because you've never seen a real god. A real god breaks away from the mortal body, and casts a divine body, godhead, and divine soul. That's something you can't even imagine. Yi Xian looked at Qing. What is this divine body he's talking about? Was silent for a moment, and then she shook her head. Too low level. I don't know. Yi Xian, Fire said angrily, arrogant. Your Excellency, you're too arrogant. You don't even know what a divine body is, and you dare to look down on gods. Qing suddenly looked at Xiaoan. She is the god you've been talking about, right? Fire said, yes. Qing looked at Xiaoan, and the latter was a little uneasy. Big Sister, Qing walked to Xiaoan, and she placed her right hand on his shoulder. Boom. In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from Xiaoan's body. Xiaoan's eyes widened, and in an instant, countless information rushed into her mind, and countless memory fragments began to condense. A moment later, the plain-dressed woman withdrew her right hand, and at this moment, Xiaoan had undergone a tremendous change. Xiaoan slowly closed her eyes, and half of her hair turned snow-white. Next to her, Fire said in a trembling voice, Holy Venerable, have you recovered your memory? After a moment, Xiaoan opened her eyes, and her gaze fell directly on the plain-dressed woman. The plain-dressed woman said, Attack! Xiaoan was silent. Next to her, Fire suddenly said, Holy Venerable, you really recovered your memory. Laughing, he suddenly looked at the plain-dressed woman. Holy Venerable, show her what a god is. Xiaoan suddenly turned and slapped. Fire's voice stopped abruptly, and his face flew several hundred zhang away. Fire was stunned. Fire looked at Xiaoan in disbelief. Holy Venerable, you hit the wrong person. Hit the woman in front of you. Xiaoan glanced coldly at Huada and then at the plain-dressed woman. Please enlighten me. As she spoke, she opened her right hand. In an instant, the entire world actually started to disappear bit by bit. All things wither, including heaven and earth. P.S. Please vote. Chapter 1820. All things wither, including this world. Yi Xian took a deep look at Xiaoan. After recovering his memories, Xiaoan is more than terrifying. His strength is definitely not lower than the supreme laws of the universe. So many mysterious experts. In fact, as God Emperor said, there are many experts in this universe. However, without reaching a certain level of strength, one can't come into contact with that circle. One can't be complacent and conceited. Not far away, Qing suddenly opened her palm, and a ray of sword light flew out from her palm. In an instant, the world returned to normal. Seeing this, Xiaoan's pupils suddenly constricted. The woman glanced at Xiaoan, and then walked over to Yi Xian. She took Yi Xian's hand and walked towards the distance. Beside Xiaoan, Huoda suddenly said, "Saint, this?" Xiaoan slowly closed his eyes. "I lost." Huoda frowned slightly. "How is this possible?" "Shut up." Xiaoan suddenly turned to look at Huoda. "From now on, I'll castrate you if you speak any more nonsense." Huoda. On the other side, Qing took Yi Xian towards the mountains in the distance. Qing held Yi Xian's hand, and the two of them walked very slowly. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Qing, what level of strength do I have to reach to jump out of this universe?" Qing said, "About 10 times stronger than that white-haired old man." Yi Xian, Qing turned to look at Yi Xian. "It's not that easy to jump out of a universe. But I believe you can do it." Yi Xian smiled. "I will definitely do it." Qing nodded. "I will wait for you." After saying that, she paused and said, "No matter how long it takes." Yi Xian's heart was filled with warmth. He held Qing's hand tightly. Just like that, the brother and sister slowly walked into the distance. About half an hour later, Qing suddenly stopped. "I have to go." Yi Xian looked at Qing. "Is this avatar going to disappear?" Qing nodded. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said, "All right." Looked at Yi Xian and said softly, "Live well. You're my only motivation to live on. Without you, my life will become meaningless." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Qing, do you not care about anyone else besides me?" Qing shook her head. "No." Yi Xian was silent. Qing gently stroked Yi Xian's cheek. "If you can't keep up with me, then wait for me. Wait until I reach the end of this universe. Then I will come back for you." With that, her body became illusory. Yi Xian smiled. "I want you to wait for me." Smiled. "Then I'll wait for you to come find me." Yi Xian said seriously, "I won't let you wait too long." Qing nodded. "All right." With that, she disappeared. She left just like that. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Then he said softly, "Wait for me. I can't let Qing down. Qing has sacrificed too much for me." Right at this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from the side. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and turned around. It was Xiaoan. At this moment, Xiaoan wasn't the same Xiaoan from before. Xiaoan gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Are you leaving?" Xiaoan replied, "Soon." Yi Xian thought for a moment and asked, "Are you going back to take revenge?" Xiaoan shook her head. "My current strength is far inferior to when I was overthrown. So, I need to recover my strength first." She paused for a moment and continued, "I want to stay with Xiaota for a while longer." Yi Xian came to an understanding. Xiaoan wants to use Xiaota to recover his strength. Indeed, there's no better place to cultivate than Xiaota. Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian. "Can I?" Yi Xian smiled. "How long?" Xiaoan fell silent for a moment. "I don't know." Yi Xian frowned. "Are you badly injured?" Xiaoan nodded. "A little." Yi Xian was slightly hesitant. Xiaoan's background wasn't simple, and his opponent wasn't simple either. Even though he wasn't afraid of trouble, he didn't want to cause trouble for no reason. Xiaoan continued. It won't take too long. I really need this bit of time. Yi Xian said with a smile. All right. Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian. Thank you. Yi Xian said, there's no need to thank me. Just keep fire virtue in check. No one will be able to protect him if he talks back to Qing, or like this again. Xiaoan nodded. Don't worry. He'll be fire virtue obediently in the future. Yi Xian blinked. Can I ask you if there's anything I don't understand? Xiaoan replied, sure. Yi Xian asked, what realm are you at? Xiaoan replied, the molded soul realm. Yi Xian's brows furrowed. The molded soul realm? Xiaoan nodded. Above the ancient god realm is the molded body realm, and above the molded soul realm is the molded soul realm. Simply put, after reaching the ancient god realm, one can mold a divine body, a godhead, and a divine soul. Finally, one can break away from the mortal body and become a god. Become a god? Yi Xian asked solemnly, are you considered a god? Xiaoan nodded. Yes. Yi Xian asked again, then what does Qing belong to? Xiaoan asked, the senior just now? Yi Xian nodded. After a moment of silence, Xiaoan answered, I don't know. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiaoan looked at Yi Xian. I don't know what realm she has reached. At this moment, her heart was filled with shock. Even she couldn't sense what realm the plain-dressed woman had reached. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that even the terrifying Xiaoan couldn't sense Qing's strength. Xiaoan said softly, her strength is beyond my understanding. Saying that, she slowly closed her eyes. In truth, she was extremely shocked at this moment. She was the top expert of her generation, and there was almost no one stronger than her. But she didn't expect that plain-dressed woman's strength to exceed her understanding. How terrifying was this? At this time, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Xiaoan, stay with Xiao Ta and recuperate. Xiaoan nodded. Many thanks. Yi Xian smiled. You're welcome. Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian and nodded slightly. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. Yi Xian said, of course. Xiaoan nodded and turned to leave. Of course, she took fire dough with her. After Xiaoan left, Yi Xian opened his palm and the azure profound sword appeared in his hand. Yi Xian hastily asked, Xiao Han, have you broken through? Xiao Han answered excitedly, not yet. But I can break through at any time. Yi Xian said, then hurry up and break through. Xiao Han said, young lord, if I choose to break through, I might need to go into seclusion for a period of time. Yi Xian smiled, it's fine, go into seclusion. I can handle the matters outside. Xiao Han said, all right. Then young lord, take care. Yi Xian laughed heartily, all right. Xiao Han entered seclusion. This time, Xiao Han directly devoured more than 1 million souls, including many ancient god realm masters. It could be said that Xiao Han really made a killing this time. And Yi Xian was also looking forward to the Azure Profound Sword's breakthrough. The current Azure Profound Sword was already close to invincible. If it broke through again, how terrifying would it be? Without thinking too much, Yi Xian left Xiao Ta. He did not linger in Nightmare Starfield but returned to Azure Province. Time to have children. As for the god's cemetery, he was not in a hurry. It was not too late to take revenge after having children. Having children was the most important thing. Otherwise, Tuoba Yen would be too lonely in Azure Province alone. God's cemetery. In front of a tomb, the left hall master's face was extremely ugly because Venerable Yu's tomb had shattered. Shattered. This meant that Venerable Yu, who went out to search for the plain-dressed woman, was dead. Was he killed by the plain-dressed woman? The left hall master frowned, his eyes filled with doubt. With Venerable Yu's strength, unless the universal law intervened, no one could kill him. Could it be that the universal law intervened? With this thought in mind, the left hall master turned and left. A moment later, the left hall master arrived at the grand hall. He walked up to the statue of the female Venerable and bowed slightly. Venerable! The statue opened her eyes, and then the left hall master spoke in a low voice, "Venerable Yu is dead." The woman frowned slightly. "He's dead as well?" The left hall master nodded. "He's dead as well. It might have been the supreme law that did it." The woman's brows knit together even more tightly when she heard this. A short moment later, the woman said, "If it really was her, then I'll kill Yi Xian myself." As soon as she finished speaking, she closed her eyes slowly, and the statue returned to normal. High up in the clouds, Fan Duo, who was teaching Daoist, suddenly raised her head because a woman was walking over slowly from afar. It was the Supreme Exalt, Daoist. Daoist walked over to Fan Duo. "Did you kill my subordinates?" Fan Duo frowned slightly. "I killed your subordinates?" Daoist stared fixedly at Fan Duo. "I've lost 2 ancient god realm subordinates. Who else could it be but you?" Fan Duo chuckled. "Daoist, do you think I would make a move against 2 ancient god realm ants?" Daoist spoke coldly. "Both of them died because they targeted Yi Xian, and Yi Xian is one of your subordinates. Besides you, I can't think of anyone else who would kill them." Fan Duo thought for a moment and said, "Daoist, I'm actually a little curious. There's no enmity between you and Yi Xian, so why do you keep trying to kill him? What's in it for you? Could it be because he's one of my subordinates?" Daoist's expression was icy cold. "You seem to be mistaken. It was your subordinates who killed my subordinates first." Fan Duo shook her head. "There's no point in talking about that. As opponents of many years, I just want to give you a piece of advice. Don't offend that kid for no reason. If you have something against him, then target me." "Really?" Daoist walked over to Fan Duo and stared fixedly at her. "The more you care about him, the more I want him dead." Fan Duo glanced at Daoist, and then she started laughing from extreme rage. "I beg you to kill him. Quickly go kill him. If you don't kill him, I'll look down on you. Go quickly, I'll cheer for you." Daoist laughed. "It seems that you really care about her. Seeing that you care about him so much, I'm really happy, really." Fan Duo was speechless. Chapter 1821. C left. Whereas Fan Duo was speechless. She and C could be considered archenemies, and they had never been on good terms. She didn't expect that C would go after Yi Xian. Could that guy Yi Xian be targeted? Fan Duo shook her head. C going after Yi Xian wasn't a bad thing for her. Because if Ce provoked the plain-dressed woman, he would die without a doubt. However, she was worried that the plain-dressed woman was temperamental. If something really happened to Yi Xian, that woman would kill everyone here. At this time, Daoist suddenly said, "Master, she seems to hate you a lot." Fan Duo nodded. "I also hate her a lot." Daoist smiled faintly. "Can you tell me more?" Fan Duo smiled. "My master and her master belong to the same master, so we can be considered to be from the same sect. And her master died in my master's hands." Daoist asked, "Revenge for killing your master?" Fan Duo nodded. Daoist's voice was soft. "No wonder." Fan Duo walked to the side and looked down, speaking in a soft voice. "2 ancient god realm masters have fallen. I wonder if she was the one who made a move." Daoist suddenly asked, "Master, how many supreme masters are there in this universe?" Fan Duo answered, "About 4. "For?" Daoist nodded, looking pensive. Fan Duo suddenly said, "That woman will probably go after him like crazy." Daoist did not reply. Fan Duo turned to Daoist, smiling. "Aren't you worried?" Daoist softly said, "Shouldn't we be worried about her?" Fan Duo blanked for a second, then smiled. "Indeed." As she said this, her expression suddenly changed. She turned around with disbelief in her eyes. Daoist asked, "What's wrong?" Fan Duo solemnly said, "That woman has broken the laws below. Now, ancient god realm masters are no longer restricted." Daoist looked at Fan Duo. "Is she declaring war on you?" Fan Duo nodded. "You can say so." Daoist asked in a deep voice, "Will she deal with him personally?" After a short moment of silence, Fan Duo said, "I'll go hold her back." After saying that, she disappeared directly. Daoist remained silent, his eyes filled with worry. After staying in the Azure Prefecture for a few days, Yixian left the Azure Prefecture and headed for the Tomb of the Gods. Vengeance must be taken. In the gods' graveyard, the left hall stood in front of the statue of the woman. The statue looked down at the left hall. That woman is currently restraining my main body. I cannot come to this world. I have already broken the nomological power of this world. You can come and go as you please. The left hall master bowed slightly. Understood. The female statue looked at the left hall master. Don't disappoint me again. The left hall master said, definitely not. The statue slowly closed her eyes. The left hall master turned and left. As soon as he left the hall, he frowned. In the next moment he disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared he was already in the graveyard. At this moment Yixian was also there. Yixian had come looking for him of his own accord. The left hall master looked at Yixian. Unlike before, there was a solemn look in his eyes. The god's graveyard had already lost 2 ancient god realm experts. If he still looked down on Yixian, then he would truly be a fool. Moreover, Yixian had come to the god's graveyard of his own accord. There was definitely something fishy going on. Yixian smiled. You're looking for me? The left hall master glanced at Yixian. Did you kill Venerable Yu? Yixian smiled. Take a guess. A complicated look flashed through the left hall master's eyes. The stupidest thing we've ever done in the god's graveyard was to target you because of a small grotto heaven. However, we had no choice. The outside world is like an ant to us. We won't argue with an ant about right or wrong. Now, you have the right to argue with us, but it's already too late. Yixian nodded. It's indeed too late. Either you kill me, or I'll destroy you. The left hall master smiled. Come Yixian. Let me see how monstrous you are. The space around the left hall master and Yixian suddenly changed. In the next moment, the two arrived in a deathly stillness in the starry sky. Space-time shift. The left hall master was about to make a move when Yixian suddenly said, You can come out. The left hall master smiled. Yes. Yixian said solemnly, As far as I know, there are restrictions outside. You can't come out as you please. However, Venerable Mu and Venerable you were able to come out. In other words, you have a supremacy helping you from behind. The left hall master nodded. Yes. Yixian smiled. So it was a supremacy who wanted to kill me. But I don't understand. When did I offend a supremacy? The left hall master looked at Yixian. Isn't the supremacy behind you the supreme law of the universe? Yixian frowned. Who told you that? The left hall master frowned as well. Isn't the person behind you the supreme law of the universe? Yixian smiled. If I'm not wrong, the supremacy behind you thinks I'm one of her people. That's why she made you go against me so desperately, right? The left hall master's expression suddenly turned ugly. Yixian wasn't a member of the supreme law? If he wasn't a member of the supreme law, then whose was Yixian's person? It was impossible for an ordinary person to nurture such a monstrous genius. At this moment, the left hall master really regretted it. Why did they have to provoke Yixian? Regardless of whether Yixian was a supremacy's person or not, they shouldn't have provoked him. It really wasn't worth it. Would there be any benefits in killing Yixian? If Yixian was just an ordinary person and killing him would make them feel better, then they would kill him. However, the problem was that Yixian wasn't an ordinary person. What a loss. Even if he went back on his word now, it would be meaningless. The supremacy had personally given the order to eliminate Yixian, so he couldn't possibly go against the supremacy's order. The left hall master collected his thoughts and looked at Yixian. Let's fight. As he spoke, he opened his palm, and a ball of black energy suddenly rose slowly from it. In the distance, Yixian smiled. He opened his palm, and the mausoleum of swords appeared in his hand. Then, he walked towards the left hall master. He walked very slowly, but he was very calm and confident. The left hall master stared fixedly at Yixian. A moment later, he suddenly slapped the ball of black energy in front of him. Boom. In an instant, the surrounding stars turned pitch black. Domain. It was a form of domain. As the star field turned pitch black, in the endless darkness, streams of terrifying devouring power surged towards Yi Xian like a tide. They were going to devour him. The devouring energy had even devoured the spatial energy in this area. Yi Xian suddenly stopped moving, and then he held the mausoleum of swords horizontally in front of him. Defend! As soon as he finished speaking, the sword domain appeared. The invincible sword domain. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, the devouring energy had stopped around 3 m away from Yi Xian. It couldn't enter. The area where Yi Xian resided was an invincible area. It was impenetrable by all techniques. Even the devouring energy was unable to corrode Yi Xian's sword domain. It was his strongest defense. The left hall master's expression became slightly unsightly when he witnessed this scene. The sword domain. Yi Xian smiled. Yes. The left hall master asked, You created it yourself? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, My father taught me. Xiaota was slightly surprised. Why does this young master suddenly want to save face this time? The left hall master gazed at Yi Xian. Who's your father? Yi Xian chuckled. A very formidable swordsman. The left hall master fell silent for a moment, and then he suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, a powerful force blasted towards Yi Xian. At this moment, the entire deathly silent starry sky started to die bit by bit. However, that force was still obstructed outside the sword domain. It couldn't advance an inch. Yi Xian was slightly shocked in his heart as he gazed at the left hall master. The sword domain was much more terrifying than he'd imagined. It really was the strongest defense. Even an ancient god realm expert like him was unable to break through his domain. How formidable! The left hall master retreated to his original position and stared fixedly at the area where Yi Xian was standing. Yi Xian's sword domain was far stronger than he'd imagined. Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Come, take my sword. As soon as his voice fell, he vanished on the spot. In the distance, the left hall master's expression changed abruptly, and he punched out. With a single punch, a powerful fist aura instantly shattered the entire star field. It was a tit for tat. At this time, Yi Xian's sword arrived. Rumble. As a wave of sword light exploded, the left hall master retreated tens of thousands of zhang away. Sword draw to decide life and death. 880 overlapping sword draws to decide life and death. The left hall master's body started to vanish as soon as he stopped. One sword to shatter his body. The left hall master found it hard to believe. He raised his head to look at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian raised his finger lightly. Rise? Before the left hall master could react, his head flew into the air. One sword cut off his head. Instant kill. With a wave of his right hand, Yi Xian locked onto the left hall master's powerful soul with a sword light. This was a powerful soul that could nourish Xiao Hun. The left hall master's soul stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his heart was filled with fear. He had never imagined that he would be defeated so easily. Defeated so easily. Wasn't Yi Xian only at the space-time realm? At this moment, the left hall master could sense that Yi Xian was indeed only at the space-time realm. But why was his battle prowess so terrifying? There was no answer. Yi Xian did not waste any words. He directly sent the left hall master into Xiaota's body for Xiao Hun to absorb. In any case, for Xiao Hun, this kind of powerful soul was better than nothing. In the starry sky, Yi Xian looked at the mausoleum of swords in his hand, a faint smile on his face. The current Huang Xiaolong could easily kill an ancient god realm master without the profound azure sword. Invincible! Yi Xian suddenly laughed. At this moment he felt invincible. Truly invincible. And this feeling was really a kind of loneliness. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly returned to Xiaota. He came before Xiaoan and said with a smile, Xiaoan, I have a defensive sword skill. Try attacking me. Xiaoan glanced at Yi Xian. Are you sure? Yi Xian laughed. Of course. As he spoke, he directly took out his sword domain. Invincible within the sword domain. Yi Xian looked at Shaoan and said with a smile, "Come." Shaoan thought for a moment, then disappeared on the spot. The next moment, the sword domain instantly shattered. Yi Xian's entire body was instantly sent flying several tens of thousands of zhang away, finally smashing heavily into a mountain. Among the rubble, Yi Xian continuously spat out blood. His eyes were somewhat dazed. "I don't want to cultivate anymore. I don't want to cultivate anymore. What's the point of cultivating hard?" Chapter 1822. Defeated in one move. At this moment, Yi Xian was a little shocked. What happened to being invincible? Invincible? His confidence of being invincible vanished at this moment. Shaoan walked in front of Yi Xian and pulled Yi Xian up. Yi Xian looked at Shaoan. "How much strength did you use just now?" Shaoan thought for a moment and said, 30%. 30%? Yi Xian lay down again. "Don't pull me. I'll lie down for a while." Shaoan was speechless. 30%. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Shaoan had only used 30% of her strength and almost killed him. If she had used a little more, would he still have a chance to live? Moreover, Shaoan was not at her peak. What happened to the invincible sword domain? Yi Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Shaoan sat next to Yi Xian and said softly, "Your sword technique is very strong." Yi Xian turned to look at Xiao and looked at Yi Xian. "Very strong." She said it very seriously. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "But I can't even take 30% of your strength." Shaoan said softly, "I've been cultivating for at least 1,000,000 years. 1,000,000 years. Yi Xian fell silent. Shaoan continued, "The reason why you find it unbelievable is because you haven't taken my strength seriously." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Indeed. In his opinion, his current strength should be the kind that would not be weak against anyone except for the 3 swords. However, the cruel reality told him that he was still far from it. Shaoan glanced at Yi Xian. "These sword techniques of yours have endless potential. Cultivate them well because the current you is still unable to unleash their true power." After saying that, she got up and walked into the distance. Yi Xian also got up and left after a moment of silence. Of course, he would not be defeated. On the contrary, he was a little happy, because failure would allow him to discover his own shortcomings. He still had a long way to go. On the other side, Fireda was beside Shaoan. He said, "Holy Venerable, the person behind this guy is so strong. Should we use him to deal with Ancient Devil?" Shaoan suddenly turned around and slapped him. But the fire virtue was sent flying. Fireda was dumbfounded. Shaoan coldly glanced at Fireda and said, "If he treats me with sincerity, I will treat him with sincerity." With that, he quickly disappeared into the distance. Would have felt a little wronged. Xiaota suddenly appeared in front of Fireda. "You were beaten again? Does it hurt?" Fireda. Very soon, one tower and one fire started fighting again. Yi Xian had returned to the graveyard of the gods. Naturally, he would not give up so easily. The graveyard of the exterminating gods. Yi Xian arrived at the graveyard. There were tens of thousands of tombs in the graveyard. Looking at the tombs, Yi Xian thought, "Damn, don't tell me they're all ancient god realm masters." At this time, Yi Xian suddenly turned around. Not far behind him stood an old man. The old man was staring at him. Yi Xian sized up the old man. This old man was also an ancient god realm master. The old man said softly, "The left reverend is dead." Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The old man glanced at Yi Xian. "You killed him." Yi Xian smiled, "Yes." Saying so, he looked around. "I'll let you fight the best." He was the best at fighting. The old man was silent for a moment, then said, "You want to find the strongest?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes. Or all of you can come at me together." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, then said, "I'll take you to the strongest. But the other side is very, very strong. Do you dare to go?" Yi Xian laughed heartily. I'm invincible. Do as you wish. The old man nodded. Follow me. With that said, he turned around and walked to the side. Yi Xian followed, and a while later, the old man led Yi Xian to a palace. Yi Xian looked at the palace and couldn't deny that it was luxurious. Yi Xian looked at the old man. Inside. The old man nodded. Yes. With that said, the old man walked into the palace. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then followed behind the old man. Experts like Xiaoan were extremely rare. As long as it wasn't this kind of expert, he was invincible. The old man led Yi Xian into the inner palace. The old man stopped in front of the female statue, then turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian looked at the female statue. It's her? The old man nodded. Yi Xian was about to speak when the female statue suddenly opened her eyes. Yi Xian frowned. He had an uneasy feeling. The old man bowed slightly to the female statue. Supremacy, we can't do anything to this person. He didn't choose to fight to the death with Yi Xian. Even the left hall master had died at Yi Xian's hands, and this meant that the graveyard of the gods couldn't do anything to Yi Xian anymore. In order to not lose any more people, he directly brought Yi Xian to see the supremacy. Didn't you want to kill Yi Xian, supremacy? Do it yourself. Staying alive was more important than pleasing the supremacy. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, Are you the strongest here? The woman was expressionless. Yes. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, I'm just here to take a look, nothing else. Farewell. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and ran. However, as soon as he ran to the entrance of the hall, an invisible barrier blocked his path, and then a terrifying aura enveloped him. Yi Xian's face instantly sank. Damn it. I was too careless. Yi Xian turned around to look at the woman, and she said indifferently, Why are you running? Yi Xian said in a low voice, You're that supremacy? The woman said coldly, Very smart. Yi Xian smiled. I don't understand. There's no enmity between us, so why do you want to kill me? The woman looked at Yi Xian. What do you think? Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, then said, Because of the supreme laws of the universe. The woman said, You're one of her people, so isn't it normal for me to kill you? Or did she not tell you about the enmity between us? Yi Xian frowned slightly. I'm one of her people? As he said, he hurriedly said, Is there some kind of misunderstanding? The woman stared at Yi Xian. Misunderstanding? What misunderstanding are you talking about? Yi Xian said seriously, I have nothing to do with her. We've only met twice. There's really no need to involve me in the enmity between you two. Disgusting. The woman suddenly said angrily, I really feel bad for that fan duo. Do you know that she didn't hesitate to block my real body for you, and you actually said that about her? Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Yi Xian was a little speechless for a moment. That supreme law was helping him? He was a little embarrassed. The woman said again, The person she values is actually so unbearable. How ridiculous. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that the supreme law was actually helping him. However, he was a little puzzled as to why it was helping him. Although they had met before, it was complete nonsense to say that they had any feelings for each other. Moreover, his intuition told him that the supreme law didn't really want to see him. Meanwhile, the woman said, Don't worry, I won't kill you just like that. I'll kill you in front of her. As she spoke, she slowly raised her right hand and pressed it down lightly in Yi Xian's direction. Bang! The space around Yi Xian started to shrink. Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't just stand there and wait for death. He immediately drew his sword and slashed. He drew his sword to decide life and death. Bang! The space around him collapsed with a bang. At the same time, the entire hall started to tremble violently. If it wasn't for the barrier around the hall, it would have been obliterated by that strike just now. The woman instantly frowned when she saw Yi Xian destroy her power. Meanwhile, cold sweat appeared on the forehead of the old man from the god's graveyard. Fortunately, he'd brought Yi Xian here. Otherwise, no one in the god's graveyard could suppress Yi Xian. The woman suddenly said, You have some ability. Yi Xian gazed at her. The enmity between you and her is between the two of you. I feel that there's no need to drag me into it. What do you think? The woman laughed coldly. Who do you think you are? Are you even worthy of bargaining with me? I'm your ancestor. Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at the woman. Don't you want to kill me? Come, I'm right here. I beg for death. The old man from the god's graveyard was dumbstruck. This fellow actually dares to treat and exalt like this? The woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. I'll fulfill your wish. As she spoke, she suddenly opened her right hand and was about to attack. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward and swiftly drew his sword and slashed at the statue. Draw to decide life and death. 880 overlapped sword draws. The woman flicked her sleeve. Bang! An expanse of sword energy shattered, and then Yi Xian instantly retreated explosively to the entrance of the hall. Meanwhile, over a dozen flying swords suddenly arrived by the woman's side. However, all of them stopped when they were just a dozen inches away from the woman. They couldn't get close at all. The woman gazed at Yi Xian while a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of her mouth, the strength of an ant. As she spoke, she pressed her fingers together and swept them lightly. Bang! The flying swords instantly shattered. The woman suddenly threw a punch at Yi Xian from a distance away. Yi Xian's pupils constricted, and he swiftly raised his sword to block. Invincible sword domain. Bang! In an instant, the sword domain he resided in had warped while formidable energy ceaselessly struck his sword domain. However, he forcefully resisted it in the end. The woman frowned when she witnessed this scene. Sword domain. Yi Xian gazed at the woman, and then he pressed his fingers together. The statue's throat suddenly split open. One sword to the head. Almost at the same time, the woman pressed down lightly with her right hand. With this pressure, the crack on her throat returned to normal. Yi Xian's face darkened when he saw this. I can't beat him. Since he couldn't win, he didn't hesitate at all. He turned around and slashed with his sword. Boom! The space suddenly shattered, and the next moment, he directly fled outside. The woman glanced at Yi Xian, who had already fled outside the main hall, and said expressionlessly, trying to escape? You are thinking too much. As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her right hand and clenched it lightly. Time reversal. Boom! Yi Xian, who had already escaped outside the hall, suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he reappeared in the hall, maintaining his previous escape posture. At this moment, time flowed backward. Chapter 1823. Supreme Being. Inside the hall, Yi Xian's face darkened. He knew that he had underestimated these so-called supreme beings. Qing Er could disregard masters of this level, even Shaoan, but there was still a big gap between him and a master of this level. He couldn't stay with Qing Er for too long, otherwise, everyone would look like ants in his eyes. The woman looked at Yi Xian. Didn't you say you wanted to run? Keep running. Yi Xian collected his thoughts, looking at the woman. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Saying so, he disappeared from the spot. In the distance, a sword light fell from the top of the woman's head. The corner of the woman's mouth curved into a mocking smile, flicking her sleeve. Boom! Yi Xian was sent flying, but he did not fly out of the hall because another invisible barrier appeared at the hall's entrance. When Yi Xian came to a stop, a trickle of blood trickled down the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then turned to look at the woman's statue. Although this woman was not in her true form, an ancient god realm master could not be compared to her. The difference between a supreme being and an ancient god realm master was like heaven and earth. The woman suddenly raised her right hand and pressed down. In the distance, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. The space above his head suddenly poured down like a great mountain. Yi Xian's right hand raised the sword horizontally to block. Sword domain. Boom! Yi Xian's body trembled violently. Although the sword domain blocked this terrifying force, Yi Xian was clearly suffering. His face was extremely pale, and blood flowed out of his mouth. The woman's heart was also filled with shock. She did not expect Yi Xian to be able to hold out until now. Not to mention Yi Xian, even if it was an ancient god realm master, this avatar of hers could kill him in a second. But Yi Xian had endured until now. There was something wrong with this guy. In order to avoid any changes, the woman's eyes flashed with a trace of cold killing intent. She opened her palm, and countless blood-red talismans suddenly appeared in the hall. The moment these blood-red talismans ignited, the space Yi Xian was in began to burn. Yi Xian's face darkened. What kind of power is this? Yi Xian activated the invincible sword domain once more. The space around him returned to normal the moment the invincible sword domain appeared, but his face swiftly turned pale. His sword domain was withstanding that terrifying power. At this time, Xiaoan's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. This is a divine spell. The woman in front of you is not simple. Yi Xian blinked. And what is a divine spell? Xiaoan said, it's an extremely ancient technique, be careful. Yi Xian said, don't you want to exchange a few blows with this woman? Xiaoan replied with a question, it's best if I don't. Because if I do, then I might draw an even stronger enemy to me. Yi Xian suddenly said, didn't you attack Qing just now? Xiaoan replied, the workings of the heavens are automatically concealed wherever she is. Can you not? Yi Xian was speechless. Xiaoan continued, she isn't in her main body, so you can deal with her. Yi Xian smiled, all right. As he spoke, he gazed at the woman. At this moment, the space around his sword domain was burning. Moreover, his sword domain wouldn't be able to hold on for long. I have to take the initiative to attack. Yi Xian suddenly withdrew his sword domain, and then he took a step forward. As soon as he did, the blood within him started to boil. Bloodline energy. Bang. Yi Xian was completely covered in blood. The woman frowned when she saw Yi Xian activate his bloodline energy. Your bloodline. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and a blood-red sword light suddenly slashed down from above the woman's head. Draw the sword to decide life and death. But this time, it wasn't 880, but 960. After activating the power of the bloodline, his strength had received a huge boost. Because his bloodline was also a growth-type bloodline. The stronger he was, the stronger his bloodline leaves would be. The woman's eyes narrowed as the sword descended, and she pressed her fingers together to block. Bang! The statue instantly retreated into the depths of the hall, and the entire hall split apart at this moment. The old man from the god's graveyard was forced into a corner by the powerful sword aura. The old man wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and glanced at Yi Xian in disbelief. This guy is so powerful? He can actually force a sovereign back with a single strike. Although the sovereign before him wasn't in her main body, she was still a sovereign. But this guy actually forced a sovereign back with a single strike. What kind of monster did the god's graveyard provoke? In the distance, the woman who'd been pushed back by Yi Xian had a look of disbelief in her eyes. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot and slashed at the woman again. A ferocious look flashed through the woman's eyes. You're courting death. As she spoke, she clenched her right hand into a fist and smashed it forward. Rumble. As soon as the two forces collided, the entire hall suddenly trembled violently, and then it exploded into nothingness. The barrier's energy had vanished without a trace. The woman stared fixedly at Yi Xian. No wonder they couldn't kill you. I have to say that even I underestimated you. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed at the woman. Slash. As soon as he spoke, over a dozen flying swords slashed towards the woman from all directions. The woman flicked her sleeve. Bang! The flying swords instantly shattered. Meanwhile, Yi Xian appeared above the woman, and then he drew his sword and slashed. Meanwhile, the woman's body suddenly became illusory. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian's sword descended, a strand of formidable force suddenly surged from the sword in his hand to his entire body. Rumble! Yi Xian's figure was instantly blasted flying, and he flew for an entire 30 kilometers. Meanwhile, the woman appeared in front of him again, and then she smashed her fist down towards Yi Xian's head. It was a very calm punch, and it was even very, very slow. However, Yixian's expression changed abruptly. That was because this woman's punch had surpassed time. It had surpassed space and time. Yixian didn't dare act carelessly, and he hurriedly activated his sword domain. Bang! Yixian was pushed back by another 30 kilometers, but he'd forcefully resisted the woman's punch. If it wasn't for the sword domain, then he wouldn't have been able to resist a single attack from her. The gap between them was quite huge. Yixian wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth, and then he gazed at the woman. The woman opened her palm, and then a ball of flames suddenly arose within it. In the next moment, an ocean of flames suddenly appeared above Yixian. The woman's cherry lips parted slightly. Incinerate! As soon as she finished speaking, the space around Yixian's sword domain instantly started burning. Yixian suddenly issued a command in his heart, and then countless rays of sword light crisscrossed around him. However, his sword wasn't able to slash apart the flames. The woman stared at Yixian and said, "Let me see how long your sword domain can persist for." Yixian slowly sheathed his sword in his right hand, and then he slowly closed his eyes. Bang! A strand of formidable sword energy suddenly swept out from within him. The woman stared at Yixian while she slowly clenched her left fist. Yixian had given her too many surprises. There were truly too many pleasant surprises and surprises. In the distance, Yixian suddenly opened his eyes, and then he swiftly drew his sword and slashed. This slash instantly tore apart the flames in front of him. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly appeared in front of him, and then she smashed her fist towards him. The heavens and the earth trembled with this single punch. This punch smashed directly onto Yixian's descending sword. Rumble! Yixian instantly retreated explosively. At the instant that Yixian retreated, the woman suddenly pressed forward and smashed her fist towards Yixian again. Yixian's pupils constricted, and he raised his sword to block it. Rumble! Yixian instantly retreated over 30 kilometers away along with his sword. After he stopped moving, Yixian spat out a mouthful of blood essence. However, the woman didn't give Yixian a chance. She appeared in front of Yixian again and was about to attack when Yixian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Bang! A blood-red ray of sword light slashed straight down towards the woman's head. Moreover, the woman's figure suddenly became illusory. Rumble! The sword light was instantly shattered as soon as it descended, and then Yixian retreated explosively once more. Meanwhile, Xiaoan's voice suddenly resounded in Yixian's mind. "That's a divine body. Your sword can't harm her." A divine body? Yixian wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and said, "But this isn't her true body." Xiaoan said, "It isn't her true body, but this clone of hers is a body as well. Ordinary swords can't harm it. So you have to use that divine sword of yours." The green mystic. Yixian's face fell. The green mystic sword was still breaking through. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly said, "Come. Let me see how monstrous you are." As she spoke, she suddenly pressed her fingers together and pointed them at Yixian from afar. Rumble! The space where Yixian resided suddenly exploded apart, and then countless strands of mysterious energy shot towards Yixian. The energy of space. Yixian was shocked. This time, he didn't utilize his sword domain, and he went head-on against it instead. He drew his sword and slashed again. However, he didn't execute sword draw to decide life and death this time. He drew his sword madly. He slashed it wildly. Bang, 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 bang. Numerous rays of light shot out like a storm from the space where Yixian resided. In an instant, the energy of space in the surroundings was completely blasted into pieces. Not far away, the woman frowned. "Have you gone mad?" Yixian's eyes gradually turned blood red, and he laughed fiercely. "Come, continue." As he spoke, his figure vanished on the spot. An expanse of blood-red light flashed like a thunderclap. The woman took a step forward, and with that step, the blood-colored sword light was forced to a stop by her. It was Yixian. Rumble! Yixian wasn't even able to react before his figure was blasted flying again. However, Over a dozen blood-red flying swords shot towards the woman at the exact same instant that he was blasted flying. The woman waved her hand lightly. Bang! The flying swords instantly vanished without a trace. The woman gazed at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian had stood up again. He'd been struck down over and over again, but he'd stood up again and again. The killing intent in the woman's eyes grew denser as she gazed at Yi Xian, who'd stood up again. The woman slowly clenched her right fist, and then an invisible force suddenly swept through the heavens and the earth. At the same time, Yi Xian's pupils constricted. At this moment he sensed the aura of death. Yi Xian suddenly roared with laughter. "Woman, didn't you want to kill me? I seek death. Come kill me." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly swung his sword. He sought death with this strike. He didn't seek victory with this strike, he sought death. Author's note: I seek votes on the last day. I've been working hard to accumulate more manuscripts, and I'll erupt once I accumulate more. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.